OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
7:30 on this Tuesday morning. You're welcome along to OTB AM. Eoin and Shane with you right the way through until 10 o'clock this morning. And a fairly busy old bank holiday weekend of sport to look back on today. We're going to be looking at the Champions Cup Rugby. We're going to be looking back at the Premier League weekend as well in the company of Keith Wood and David Meyler between now and 10 o'clock. And of course, a massive midweek of Champions League action is coming our way as well. We've got Liverpool against Real Madrid tonight. We've got Manchester City against Borussia Dortmund tonight as well. It's a brilliant start to the quarterfinals of the Champions League. So plenty to look forward to as well as look back on this morning. And we would love to hear from you as well. You can comment on the YouTube stream as ever if that's where you're watching, or you can drop us a tweet at Off The Ball as well. Shane Hannon, a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Eoin. How are things?
Very well, thanks. I guess there's only one place to start, isn't there? On a Tuesday morning after a Monday night football that saw the end of the irony attached to Messi Lingard once and for all. It is with a heavy heart we have to announce that phrase is no longer ironic. He has delivered, and this has become one of the stories of the season, the resurgence of Jesse Lingard at West Ham United.
My brother, a Manchester United fan, was not a fan, to say the least, of Jesse Lingard at the start of the season, and was one of those voices calling for Lingard to be released, to be sold, to be sacked, to be whatever. He is now in my brother's football fantasy team. So that is how things have taken a turn for Jesse Lingard. And you look at him last night, and not just his involvement, but the way in which he's involved and the way in which he's playing, the confidence he has. He did a Dimitar Berbatov turn at one point in that match, in the move for I think it was the second goal. And look, he's incredible. Gary Lineker tweeting last night, wonder if a club like Man United will have a look at him in the summer. He's just a different player. And you look at Donny van de Beek in that Manchester United team at the moment, and you think, who would United fans rather at the moment based on current form? So if he does come back to Old Trafford, he's going to come back a completely different player, just completely shorn of confidence at Old Trafford. And now he's one of the best players in the world, Eoin.
On current form, he's one of the best players in the Premier League. 9 goal involvements since he's joined West Ham United. The only player who can match him for that when it comes to goals and assists over that same period is Harry Kane. The conversation that we're seeing quite a lot from Sky is who's going to make the England squad, and it seems at the moment that Jesse Lingard is a no-brainer at this point, which just seems an astonishing development from his perspective. I didn't really care one way or the other about Jesse Lingard. I remember a couple of good seasons that he had when he showed himself to be a pretty good player. I thought that maybe Everton was going to be his level and that he'd be a decent player at that sort of level as his career went by. I'm slowly, though, rooting for Jesse Lingard. I'm really, really happy that this has happened for him. This has kind of come out of nowhere, and I want this to continue. I want him to go to the Euros. I want him to be successful. It is amazing what this sort of human comeback story can do for someone. I didn't care about this guy, and all of a sudden I want him to keep banging in goals. I want West Ham to qualify for the Champions League. I want this guy to be happy.
There's just something about him. He applies himself, and a lot of people had this image of him at United as someone just sitting there and didn't deserve to be there. He scored a winner in an FA Cup final for Manchester United, and United fans won't forget that. But he clearly is a player that doesn't want to just sit back at a massive club like United and pick up wages. He wants to play football, and he's demonstrated that in his move to West Ham. And like you mentioned, his international ambitions. What a time for him, from a personal perspective, to be playing this well, because Gareth Southgate would probably be mad not to have him in the Euros squad, given his current form. Adam Hurrey from The Athletic, great quote from him last night on Twitter. I saw he was keen to point out what this could mean for Jesse's international ambitions, and he said, Lingard now officially upgraded from departure lounge to standing on the touchline in a pink bib, arm in arm with Nick Pope and Dominic Calvert-Lewin, watching England lose on penalties to Spain in the quarterfinals. So that's what's in future for Jesse Lingard now that he's playing so well. And look, he can certainly add to his 27 England caps the way he's playing. But it's not just the goal involvement, as you said. What was 6 goals and 3 assists in his 8 games, Premier League games so far? A man just playing with an abundance of confidence. And you often talk about confidence and how important it is in football. But with someone like Jesse Lingard, you're thinking, his career is kind of drawing to a close. Maybe he could be a top player at a top championship club or a relegation threatened Premier League club, but he's helping David Moyes get top 4 with this West Ham team. And if they secure top 4, he is a large part of that.
What do you do with him if you're Manchester United next season? If you're a Solskjaer, do you bring him back in? Do you like essentially start him in every single game and try and hope that his form translates into next season? Or is it a situation where he's got to be content with being a bit part player once again and that confidence just chips away?
Like Solskjaer was quite, even before these really good performances started, Solskjaer spoke quite glowingly about him. When he was sending him out on loan, he was quick to say, Jesse is going to come back a different player. This is going to be a really good thing for him. He's going to get some game time. He wasn't getting game time here. I wish he was. But this is something that he needs. It's almost like Solskjaer saw what he was capable of doing, and I don't think any Manchester United fans really thought that he could reignite his career at Old Trafford. But now you have to think, I mean, next season, he's one of the first names in the United team sheet. Like, he's ahead of someone like Donny van de Beek, who just has been, so far anyway, an experiment that has not worked out. And even Van de Beek came on against Brighton the other night, and I don't think he touched the ball in the 7 or 8 minutes he was on the pitch. And Lingard is playing quite the opposite. He is seeking out the ball. He wants the ball at every single turn. So if you compare him to someone like Donny van de Beek, it's a no-brainer that Jesse Lingard comes into that team. And if United can spend well in the transfer window this summer and get a proper striker in, assuming that someone like Cavani is going to leave, and he's of the age anyway where they need to be looking elsewhere. Like, Lingard is such a creative player. He can create more goals for a target man, like Bruno Fernandes has done. So I think he comes back and he plays an important role for Manchester United next season if he keeps playing the way he is.
I'm not sure that's the case. Like, I think that being better than Donny van de Beek doesn't necessarily make you first name in the team sheet whatsoever. I think you'd expect to be better than Donny van de Beek, and at least that gets you some game time off the bench. But does Jesse Lingard then play in a wide position? Like, he doesn't take Bruno Fernandes' position, that's for sure. And it seems that it is in that more central role that he's shooting the lights out for West Ham, that you can't drop Fernandes for him, and Lingard would just have to settle for either playing in a wide position regularly or being backup to Bruno, maybe on Champions League nights, or if the pool stages or the group stages are kind of getting away from United, or if they're qualified already, or on FA Cup nights. Like that's the only place where I could see him being a number 10 for Manchester United next season. So they're actually in a bit of a tricky position. Manchester United would really like to have a top-class central defender out on loan playing really well, or maybe a top-class number 9 out on loan playing really well. The one player that they don't really need at the moment is a number 10, and Bruno Fernandes is their best player. He has been since he signed for the club, and I'm just not sure if Jesse Lingard actually comes in and takes a spot. I'm not sure if Jesse Lingard comes in and maybe nudges Mason Greenwood down the pecking order or Marcus Rashford down the pecking order, because that's what you need to do to be a starter in that Manchester United team. And I just think that he's caught between two stools at the moment, and it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this summer, because his form suggests that he could start for everyone in the Premier League, but there's a bit more information than just his West Ham career so far. There is the Manchester United evidence that we have, and that he wasn't good enough to get into that starting team. So maybe it's a permanent move, and maybe West Ham are challenging again next season for the top 4 if they don't make it this year. Like, Shane, we got thinking as well about where this actually ranks in terms of the great revivals of recent times. Like, when it comes to Premier League footballers, like I was thinking maybe wider than Premier League as well, although I didn't have too many other examples. A couple of people who came to mind, I'm not sure who's coming to your mind. Someone like Nicolas Anelka experienced something like this. I felt a similar weird sense of awe at Nicolas Anelka coming back from a couple of tough seasons, I guess, after he'd left Arsenal in particular. I know he had a good time at Manchester City in the mid-noughties, but then going on to be brilliant for Chelsea in the late 2000s and winning a Premier League title. Diego Forlan suffered from a similar Jesse Lingard Manchester United experience before going to La Liga and being absolutely unbelievable. Like, where else are we putting Jesse Lingard when it comes to ranking this resurgence?
You've gone for the real hipster answers here in career revivals in Nicolas Anelka and Diego Forlan. I was thinking more in obvious lines, but like Tiger Woods is an obvious one. 54 holes into the Masters in 2019. He's 2 shots adrift. He's of course recovered from the back surgery. 11-year wait for major number 15. I remember hearing the Golf Weekly lads harp on about this mystical major number 15 and how it was never going to happen, and that Jack Nicklaus's 18 was set in cement, and Tiger Woods' number 14 was set in cement. But for him to do that, and the players that were chasing him in that final day, if you remember as well, Brooks Koepka, Dustin Johnson and Xander Schauffele, An incredible performance by Tiger Woods, and to have all those back problems in the surgery, that's one of the biggest comebacks.
Tiger is like, you've put down the ace right there. That is the comeback. I'm not going to be able to actually disagree with that too much. I'm talking about coming from a position of being average for so long, and then all of a sudden rediscovering something that we saw maybe in the early part of their career and going to a whole new level. Now, of course, Tiger is that, but I guess Tiger had a lot of other issues other than being average at his sport, which I don't know, just makes this Lingard thing all the more unlikely that there wasn't this significant moment like Tiger Woods had. But Tiger's a great shout. I'm not going to be able to top that, Shane. What else have you got?
Like you're talking about people being average and recovering. It's slightly different. Niki Lauda's recovery is probably
also extraordinary.
Like a whole different level. That was in 1976. We're on his way to a world championship in his Ferrari, has a crash that almost takes his life, and he has those severe burns that he's left with, marks on his face for the remainder of his life. And then 43 days later, he's behind the wheel of the Italian Grand Prix, and he goes on to win 2 more world championships. Like, I was watching the episode of Drive to Survive on Netflix recently, the episode 9 of season 3, where it details Romain Grosjean's crash in Bahrain last November, and to see what these guys do, and considering the safety improvements since Lauda had that crash in 76, for him to recover 43 days later, get into a car, and then go on to win 2 more world titles. Like, I don't want to compare Jesse Lingard to Niki Lauda, because they're two totally different things and 2 totally different recoveries. But like, Lauda was a world champion before, he was a world champion afterwards, so it's slightly different. Like, we'll talk about Stephen Hendry's recovery a little bit later on. Yeah. Muhammad Ali's another one. You know, he had the fight of the century against Frazier in 1970, but the whole Vietnam stuff kind of led to a lot of dissent in America at the time, and he recovered. But again, it's different for someone to recover from, as you said, a position of average, complete average Joe-ness to what he has done is different, and a career written off really in many regards, Jesse Lingard, and for him to come back from that is quite extraordinary. So there have been a lot of big comebacks, but in footballing terms and in terms of a career being written off, Jesse's up there.
Yeah, being written off, like at least with the 3 that you've mentioned, there was never a sense that they weren't great and that they weren't going to be generational talents. Like, I'm talking this morning about the Robert Huths of the world, the people who, like, we all thought their career would never reach the heights of, say, his Chelsea days, and then he goes to Stoke, he goes to Middlesbrough, and then he wins a Premier League title once again with Leicester City. I'm talking about him. I'm talking maybe a little bit about Danny Ings. I know Danny Ings had terrible injury trouble, but there was also a sense when he played a few games for Liverpool that maybe he was just going to be a bit of a flop. Granted, what was it, 10 Premier League games in total he played for Liverpool, and then last season he had that sort of resurgence, which was just absolutely brilliant to see. One man who's not a footballer, Shane, who I would put in this bracket firmly, and it plays into last night a little bit, is David Moyes. Like, the career resurgence from David Moyes has been another brilliant storyline of this season, that Manchester United, we thought, had taken his soul and ripped it to pieces. We thought he'd gone to Spain, and once he did that funny accent in a press conference in Spain, we thought that was it, that David Moyes had lost his mind. And even the first West Ham stint was kind of plagued with averageness, and David Moyes didn't look like he'd ever be able to make it back to his Everton standing. Look at him now. He's the one laughing at this point. Like, the Champions League qualification thing may not happen, but still you can write this down as an unbelievably successful season for him. There's a couple of suggestions in here, a couple of comments. Brian Dillon says, my Bolton team saved Anelka's career, which is probably true, to be fair. Chelsea can thank Bolton for what they did to Nicholas Anelka. And Isel Cody says, surely Shane Hannon and Owen Sheehan should be championing Monaghan's finest for the show today, Callum Robinson. We do have a bit of that coming up later on in our performance ranking, Shane, as well as a bit of snooker as well, if you want to whet the appetite just a little bit for that.
Yeah, like, I stayed up late last night and watched this. Finished at 11:43 p.m.
Right.
Stephen Hendry against Jimmy White, and I turned on the TV, and as I said on Twitter, it was like being transported by Doc Brown to Back to the Future, because you're just looking at the TV thinking, this is bizarre. To see Stephen Hendry and Jimmy White up against each other. Like, I wasn't a child of the 80s, but I felt like a child of the 80s last night. I felt like throwing on some 80s music in the background and watching these incredible 2 titans. And you know what? It was absolutely terrible. I mean, the quality was grim, to say the least. They're not the players they were, but we'll talk about them a little later on. It was nice to see them, especially playing in such an important match. It's the first round qualifier for the World Snooker Championship, so to see them both at it, like, Hendry's put on a bit of timber. To be fair, he's got a little bit of weight on him. He doesn't look like quite the same player, but probably too many deep-fried Mars bars and other Scottish delicacies, I think, over the last number of years. But to be fair to him, he's 52 years of age. And he won. So Hendry was 6-3 victor over Jimmy White last night. So that's one recovery. Can I just mention one other that I think might happen? Phil Jones. Phil Jones popped up on my YouTube last night. I was browsing, and the time where he took the ball off Olivier Giroud when he was lying prostrate in the ground and headed the ball along the turf to stop a chance for Olivier Giroud. And I'm just thinking about Phil Jones right now, sitting on that Manchester. Well, he's not sitting on the bench at the moment. He's injured. But when he comes back, if he could come back, get into that Manchester United team and do some damage, that's peak Jesse Lingard. That's above Jesse Lingard, in fact. We often forget about Phil Jones. We just think about the faces he pulls and the meme that he has become. But if Phil Jones can get back in that Manchester United team, and I'm not saying he's going to, but that would surpass and eclipse anything Jesse Lingard has done at West Ham.
Yeah, Phil Jones definitely would be one. Romelu Lukaku all of a sudden comes to mind as somebody who's in the same category. I'm noticing a theme here, Shane, that maybe there's one football club who have maybe underachieved a little bit and their players have just been shorn of confidence, or maybe the pressure's actually been weighed down on them. Maybe that's the situation here. Right, it is 7:46 a.m. on this Tuesday morning. OTB AM is live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. As you can see, plenty coming up this morning. David Meyler is on standby. We'll get to him in just a moment. The sports page is coming your way at 8:05 this morning. And then Keith Wood's take on Munster. A bit of a deeper conversation about where Munster go over the next little while, coming your way at 8:20. White versus Hendry, as Shane has already teased, coming your way at 8:20. And then the performance rankings at 8:50 this morning. We'd love to hear your shouts on that as well if you want to give us a tweet for anybody who should be in the good, the bad or the grand this weekend. Rassie Erasmus then is coming your way at 9:10, an exclusive interview with him. And then Katie Walsh, an interview with her, is coming up at 9:30 this morning. David Meyler, good morning.
Good morning.
Talk to us about Jesse Lingard. What has happened over the last few weeks? Why has Jesse Lingard not only rediscovered a previous version of himself, but it seems like the best version of himself has come out?
Just simply because he's happy. He's playing football. You could see him last night. He's playing with a smile on his face. You know, that's what it's all about. You know, you can tell obviously he loves Manchester United. He loved being there. He played a lot, but you know, in the last probably year, 18 months, he's not played much under Solskjaer. So to get that loan move and get into a team, working with a manager who knows him, he's just playing with a smile on his face and he's enjoying his football, and you can see that in his performances.
If you're Manchester United at the moment, are you looking at him and saying, yep, this guy has a real role to play for us next season? Or is it just one of those things where the makeup of their talent just doesn't allow him to get back in and get enough minutes to allow him to keep that confidence?
I think it'll be something they'll look at. I think Jesse will wonder how much game time he'll get, you know, if he goes back to United. You know, obviously his performances have been very good for West Ham, but if he makes the Euro squad for England, that would be down to, you know, his form at West Ham. So he might look then after that tournament, or if he doesn't make that tournament, you know, I need to be playing regular football. I believe he's now 28, so he's not as young as we all think he is, but it'll be certainly a case for him that I reckon he'll look to move on. Of course, look, United will only be laughing because if they were to have sold Jesse Lingard in January, they probably would have got a lot from him. Now his stock price would be, you know, way up just due to his performances, the goals he scored, the assists he's had. So I think probably what will happen will be best case scenario. He'll move probably permanently to West Ham. United will get a lot more money than they would have. And Jesse will be happy going there.
It probably shows, David, the amount of natural confidence you need to actually succeed at Manchester United, that it's almost a given that things might not go your way, certainly under the level that they were under Alex Ferguson, that you need to have a serious reservoir of self-belief to actually get through those tough moments. Of
course, but I think I did highlight before in the past on the show that, like, Jesse's gone through some tough stuff outside of football. He has spoken openly about it, and that does take a great effect. I know Manchester United, they're a great family club. They'll have supported him. But at times, it's that release once you actually are playing football that you can go up the pitch and you can forget about everything else going on in the world and you can just concentrate on that game of football. And I think that's probably been like the biggest thing for him is, you know, just getting back on that pitch, having belief in yourself. It will have come from the games he's played in. So Look, it has been a tough time for him, but now we're seeing, the best of Jesse Lingard.
When it comes to West Ham and their prospects at the end of the season, I know Declan Rice is out injured, and you'd suspect that the Chelsea result on Saturday was a bit of an aberration, so nobody's saying that they're going to get there. But how close do you reckon this is going to go to West Ham getting top four?
Well, look, do you know what, Owen? It's going to be very tough. But I love David Moyes' post-match interview last night, and he said, I've seen pundits and everybody talking about West Ham in the top four, and if you'd said that a year ago, he was kind of smiling and laughing, talking about it, and he said, why not? But they've got 7 games to go. If they go into them with the confidence that they're going into games, even look, of course, I know they were very comfortable in that game last night. They conceded goals. But in the past, West Ham would have probably given that up, and they would have probably drawn the game. They found a way to win. So why not? Look, it's a bit of a fairy tale story. It's a bit like, look, I know it's slightly different with Leicester winning the league, but it's something different. If West Ham were to break the top four, it would be incredible, because you're looking at one of the bigger teams missing out. So, yes, it's going to be very tough, but why not? Why can't we believe that they could, push on and finish in the top four?
One of the reasons why it may not happen is because of Liverpool. Liverpool and their charge right back up the Premier League table. Tonight, David, I presume from a Liverpool supporter standpoint, is just such a huge night for them. I guess memories of 2018 come to mind. Is there a lot of anger amongst Liverpool fans that getting revenge against Real Madrid for what happened that night is a necessary step?
I wouldn't say revenge. I certainly wouldn't look at it like that. Liverpool went on the following year and obviously won it against Spurs. So this is just another opportunity. Like Jurgen Klopp has highlighted the fact that it's kind of become a mini season for them. You've seen their performance against Arsenal, how dominant they were. So certainly now they'll be looking at can we kick on there, and they'll fancy themselves against Real Madrid. There was a great thing shown of the Real Madrid squad from the last few years. There is still quite a few players still playing. They're not the same Real Madrid as of old. So certainly Liverpool coming back into a good bit of form is only positive for them. And I just feel that Liverpool will get the better of Madrid.
Why so?
Firstly, because I'm biased. I'm a Liverpool supporter. But I don't know. It's just, Liverpool have always, the biggest thing I always felt for Jurgen is how does he turn Liverpool into, a Premier League winning team? We always know Liverpool are going to be, up there. You've seen a few years ago when they just pipped to the title by City and, of course, winning it. They've always been able to turn up in Europe and perform. You've seen, obviously, I know they lost the Europa League final and they get to the Champions League final after that and they lose that, but then they go back. They've always been able to turn up in the one-off games and perform. They've always been that European team. I know, obviously, I've relationships with a lot of the players that, Jurgen had set their stall out in the sense that they used to train on Tuesday and Wednesday nights when they weren't in the Champions League and kind of shaped it around that. That was kind of their end goal. I just feel that, going into this game, even if you look at the Arsenal-Liverpool game, Arsenal defended deep and it was kind of their own mistakes. Whereas Real Madrid are going to come out and they're going to go to Liverpool. We're Real Madrid. We're going to play our game. There won't be as much respect as Liverpool get in the Premier League. They'll go, we saw that in Leipzig, that they'll go out and they'll want to play. They'll press Liverpool high. They'll go after them, which will open the game up. And I think Liverpool on the counter-attack with the front three that they have, it will suit them. It's why we saw, Salah Mane performing well against Leipzig, getting the goals. So I just find Madrid are going to come out and, try and enforce their style. And I think Liverpool will be able to pick them off at times. And of course, if you give those players space, they will score goals.
David, I guess one of the players that Real Madrid will give plenty of respect for tonight is Trent Alexander-Arnold, and he was very impressive on Saturday night against Arsenal. And Michael Richards was talking about him being, the best fullback in Europe. And I just want to get your take on that. Where does he rank in terms of the top tier leagues in Europe in terms of fullbacks, and how ridiculous does Gareth Southgate's decision look now to drop him from the England squad?
Look, it's a very tough one. I'm biased. I'm a bit I'm not as strong-minded as Carragher, for any of those who watch Monday Night Football and the way he speaks about him. But certainly Trent, if he touches up on his defensive duties, but going forward, there's no doubt he's the best right back in the world with his range of passing, his delivery. He can even pop up with goals. it was very surprising to see him not in the England squad. England do have a array of very good right backs, with Walker, Trippier, Reece James, even Kieran Trippier. There's very good defenders, all slightly different. I suppose Trippier and Trent are probably the closest because they both have very good delivery, albeit I think Trent is better. It was a surprise. Maybe it is, kind of a wake-up call to Trent. Kind of like Gareth wants him back at the level that he knows he can get him at. And then we've seen that there was a reaction in his performance via Arsenal. So it was an interesting one, but maybe, sometimes players do need that kind of kick up the backside. But I certainly expect, Trent to be going to the Euros with England and definitely pushing, whether they play the wing backs or whether they play the fourth at the back. It'll be interesting, but I definitely do think that Trent he's certainly up there as one of the best fullbacks in the world.
You mentioned the kick up the ass, and that's probably something that maybe Trent needed. And like he's spoken since about how the fact that he doesn't really pay any attention to the England call-ups. It'd be a lovely thing if it happens again. But even from your own career or experiences of playing with other international players at clubs, like if someone doesn't get picked in an international squad, do you see that happen often, that a player maybe gets that desire to then knuckle down and focus and perhaps become a better player, that maybe being dropped from an international squad once or twice could actually be a really good thing for a player?
No, definitely. You could become comfortable. That's a thing. I've spoken about this in the past. Like when we qualified for the Euros in 2016, I'd featured in some of the qualifier games and I picked up an injury before the Bosnia games. I was just so desperate to make the 23 to make sure that I was going to France. I became quite comfortable then. I didn't push myself and kick on. That I could have done more if you looked at, after the couple of games, in training, whatever. I was so desperate to make the 23. I didn't concentrate then. Can I get on the pitch? I kind of became, almost, I'm here now. This is it. I've done it. But I should have gone on another level. And sometimes fellas become like that. That sometimes when you are dropped, it is a shock to the system. You do think I need to do more. I was just so concentrated making those, on that 23 when Martin picked it, that I should have done more when I was in training. I know now looking back, I won't say it's a regret. It's an experience I've learned from it. But certainly, like in this case with Trent, he'll definitely have played on his mind. And the whole thing of I won't listen to, the outside noise that Trent would have heard. It's going to play on his mind because it was everywhere. Everybody was, talking about it. And then obviously when his manager comes out, digs him up and says, I don't know how Garrett's not putting him in. I couldn't believe it either. But at the same time, it's it will have been on his mind. And of course, you could tell by his performance. That's probably the best he's played all season, which is only good for Liverpool and it's good for him. But you'd expect him now to continue that on and get himself straight back into the England squad.
Klopp was talking about the possibility of starting all four of those attackers, the usual front three and Jota, and he says there will be a moment when we give it a try. Is it tomorrow? We will see. If you're Klopp this evening, David Meyler, is it all four? Is it Jota in with the big three up front and hoping for the best?
I don't think Owen knows hoping for the best. I think Jota's well capable of playing in midfield. He's proven that. The only thing is he would then, if he slots into that midfield three, he's going to be very attacking as opposed to, with Milner, Thiago, Wijnaldum, Fabinho, there's more balance. So that if he does go that way, whichever two he plays in midfield, you'll be probably looking at Fabinho and Thiago or Fabinho and Wijnaldum, that they'll be able to get a balance to allow Jota to get forward and join in on the attacks. Will he go that way? I can't predict his mind. Jota has obviously had good international form, scoring, then come back in and get the 2 goals against Arsenal. That you'd certainly expect. There is a case for him to play. Look, I'd love to see him put all four of them in because I do think Jota will do his defensive duties. But it'll be interesting to see. I would like to see him go with the 4 because I think Jota deserves that. He scored some crucial goals. He's been a fantastic signing for Liverpool. So I would like to see him go with the 4 of them.
And sorry then, so Jota will be the front of a midfield 3. Who would be your 2 behind as a rule?
I'd go for Fabinho and Thiago. I think Gini misses out.
that's probably a tight one in Klopp's mind, is it, between Wijnaldum and Thiago, because of the fact that Jota is such an attacking player. But then again, like, we haven't actually seen him in the midfield as often as he has been up front, and I guess that's just such an underrated part of Jota's game.
No, it is. Of course, look, you could make the case that does he then drop Firmino, start Jota, and then muddle around with the front three? He's got great options.
Yeah.
Certainly, I think against Real Madrid, Thiago's used to playing, against Real Madrid, say with this, Spanish football from his time at Barcelona, that he can control a game, with his passing, etc. And then obviously Fabinho is excellent at what he does in breaking up the second balls, winning those, stopping counter attacks and stuff like that. I think Gini's probably more industrious in the way he gets around the pitch and that, but I think Thiago brings that type of control. It'll certainly be interesting, but that's the way Jurgen's not a big fan of breaking up the front three unless he's gone, unless he's changing the squad. And certainly this isn't a game to be resting Mane or Salah or whatever. So I'd expect the front three to remain the same. It's just whether or not he tries to slot him into midfield.
Just on Fabinho then, David, like back in midfield on Saturday, and I think that performance on Saturday probably just illustrated how badly Jurgen Klopp needs him in that team. I mean, they've beaten Leipzig and Wolves and now Arsenal since mid-March. Perhaps no coincidence that those results have come since Fabinho's come back into this team.
Yeah, you miss that presence, as a holding midfielder. What he gives. He's very comfortable on the ball. He's very good at reading danger. He just, of course, look, he slotted in centre half and he did reasonably well. Obviously, there were certain games where it didn't work, it didn't go as planned. But you always kind of find that when the centre halves were injured, they were moving 2 or 3 players around to kind of accommodate. Whereas now he's just kind of going, do you know what? Nat Phillips has done well. Kabaka's doing, getting better and doing well. I'm just going to go with the 2 of them. And a lot of the time now, Fabinho is actually stopping the attacks in midfield so that it doesn't actually get to the back line, which then that's the big presence that he brings. There's no doubting, he's exceptional at what he does. If you've got to be honest and say he's up there with the best in the world at doing it. Obviously, there's some other outstanding players in that position. But that's the benefit. That's why he is, holding midfielder. That's why Liverpool signed him. Of course, due to other circumstances, they had to slot him in centre half. But certainly, putting him back in has been a game changer for Liverpool and has made them more balanced. Certainly allows, the other players to go forward.
David, like Nat Phillips and Ozan Kabak in the centre of that defence, like the 18th central defensive pairing that Klopp has had to deal with this season, and he stumbled across something quite good. They played well on Saturday. How do you feel with that pair coming up against someone like Kareem Benzema tonight? Because you could argue that this is a new type of challenge for them, a striker with a world pedigree. But then again, you look at every training session at Melwood, they come up against the big 3, Firmino, Salah and Mane. So are you worried at all about the prospect of those 2 coming up against Kareem Benzema tonight?
I think they're starting to, form a little partnership now. They're starting to get more, familiar with their own squad of players. Of course, when you play for Liverpool, you've got the 2 fullbacks who are bombing forward. You're then isolated one-on-one. That's the beauty of Virgil van Dijk and all the other best centre-halves in the world, that they can defend 1v1. They don't mind it. That was the big concern in games Liverpool lost, that defenders were being left on their own. Fullbacks we just had no cover. Now Fabinho adds that discipline and that know-how of the game that certainly Kabak and Phillips have been able to deal with players. There's no doubting that Kareem Benzema has been a wonderful player, probably one of the most underrated in world football for many years. I think a lot of people just dismiss him, but if you look at his numbers, I think he was obviously overshadowed by Cristiano, which is normal. I think Cristiano's done that to a lot of people over his career. It is a new challenge for them, but at the same time, they'll have played against top players. Like you said there, even training against the front 3 will only make them better. So it will be a challenge, but look, they just need to make sure that they're on it. They keep it simple, cut out any mistakes. They get tight when they need to drop off, when they need to. And I'm pretty sure that they'll be confident in themselves and their ability to stop Benzema doing anything.
Let's talk about Manchester City against Borussia Dortmund then, David. obviously the big narrative around this is the fact that City are losing a totemic striker, and there's a certain individual going up against them tonight who's going to be on the market in the next summer or two. Is there anything about this potential deal of your Manchester City that would throw you off the scent? Because everything just seems to work potentially here. Every box seems to be ticked when it comes to Erling Haaland.
No, it does. Albeit he's not Pep's typical striker, is he? You know, you look back at Barcelona with Etu and that, and obviously going to Bayern Munich or whatever. Okay, Lewandowski was that big man. But he's always kind of gone for like small, nimble, who's quick, who's very mobile. Like, okay, Haaland is, don't get me wrong, he's very quick, but he's not. He doesn't have the passing ability that Aguero has. Aguero can kind of come off the shoulder and kind of link the play. Haaland, if you watch him, we've seen many times, because this big conversation of Haaland or Mbappe, they've showed that he just wants to play inside the 6-yard box. He just wants to score goals. His record is off the charts. I think tonight is a bit of a trial move for Haaland. I think if he's to, you know, put in performance against Man City, I think then it kind of comes out of Pep Guardiola's hands, in the sense that the big boys who are running Man City are just saying, right, do you want them? Yes or no? I think we're going to go and get him. There obviously is that problem between Guardiola and Riola. Whether or not they'll be able to work together, I don't know. Maybe Pep will just say, look, sign him, he'll step aside, and then the big hitters will come in from Man City to organise that. Certainly, now Aguero's gone. Last week or the other day was, you know, Pep was saying we don't have the money to buy anyone. And then he's kind of thought in the last 48 hours that we'll be looking to bring someone in. So I do think Haaland fits the bill. Whether or not they'll go from, I don't know. Of course, there's that massive cloud in the sky about Harry Kane. What's he going to do? I think Pep will be a big admirer of Harry Kane, someone who knows the league. Be certainly interesting, but, you know, Haaland, you get a young fella that, you know, you could potentially have for the next 7, 8, 9 years.
How dramatic a shift would it be for Pep Guardiola to have a system that gets the most out of someone like Erling Haaland? Is it worth the shift that you mentioned there in order to get the best out of him, basically?
I don't think they'll have to shift too much.
Right.
Like, you know, City will still play with the other 10, just dominating possession. Like, and he'll coach. That's what the best do. They coach them to make them adjust, make them play better, kind of suit their system. There's no doubting Pep will be able to do that. You look at all throughout his career, moving players into different positions and, you know, getting the best out of them. You looked at Lamb coming into midfield and it looked like a stroke of genius when he was at Bayern Munich. So there's no doubting that if Haaland came, he'll make him, you know, touch up on all round of his game, because we know going forward, if he gets chances in around the box, he'll score goals. But can you imagine Haaland, you know, in a Man City team, he'd probably get the bones of 40 goals a season. I've no doubt that Pep would be able to tweak a few things and make him even better.
David, just on Man City and I guess the pressure on Pep Guardiola to deliver in the Champions League, like there always is. Is there a little bit extra pressure this year, considering the fact that the Premier League title is all but wrapped up? It gives them maybe a bit less of an excuse. You could be excused for taking an eye off Europe some years, but this year, really, the focus for them now has to be fully on the Champions League. Does that add a little bit extra pressure on the shoulders of Pep Guardiola?
Of course, there'll be pressure. It's the one, it's the one he's not won with City. He didn't win it with Bayern Munich either, so there is that pressure. He's not won it in a while. That's kind of benchmark, isn't it? That's the one that those managers will want to win. Of course, Man City have never done it, so that challenge is there for him. There will be pressure. They'll want to get that Champions League trophy. Look, like you said, they've got the League Cup final, so they're in that. I think they needed 7 points, something like that in their remaining games, so they look like they're quite comfortable. I think the big thing is last season was very disappointing when they dropped out, that they didn't kind of go for the game, kind of tried to play reserve football. And you know, if you looked at the earlier stages of the Premier League season, Pep came out and said, like, I'm changing this. I'm not happy. I think they'd won a game. I saw an interview he did where he just said, I'm not happy with the way we're playing. He said, I want us to go back to just getting on the ball, playing it with a bit of freedom. I think when they go into this game against Dortmund, they'll obviously respect them, but you can just imagine Man City are just going to go and dominate. They're in great form. Obviously, they had a very good victory over Leicester. So I expect them to go out, dominate possession, and then just I think they just need to take it game by game and just focus on, next one that matters. He's been very good at rotating the squad, so he's trying to keep as many players fresh and kind of hit this. He's nearly got 17, 18 players playing at a consistently high level. So whichever team he does pick for the Dortmund game, they're all playing at a top level. So it will be, look, the pressure's on him to win the league, or the Champions League, sorry. So whether or not they'll do it, I don't know, but they've certainly got a good chance.
Yeah, they certainly do. It's an 8 o'clock kickoff in that game, and indeed the Real Madrid against Liverpool game tonight. Just one other Premier League talking point from the weekend, David, is Tottenham Hotspur, Newcastle coming from behind to get a point against Jose Mourinho's side, and predictably he once again blamed the players for their failings. Same manager, different players is what he said to describe the contrast in success throughout his career. How does that make you feel as a player when your manager is saying something like that?
Well, you go one or two ways. You either say, I'm going to prove him wrong, or you sulk and moan in the corner, and then the relationship is just dissolves. It's not a great thing to hear. You'd kind of prefer him, if he's going to say it, you'd say it in the change room, which I imagine he probably has said something behind, closed doors. Of course, look, they're not the same players, Davinson Sanchez and those there. It's not John Terry. It's just the sad truth. He knows that when he took the job, when he went in there. That's a group of players, a very good group of players, but they're not the Chelsea team. When we speak about some of the the best Premier League teams of all time, that Chelsea team under Mourinho in the 04-05 seasons comes up all the time. They're an incredible team. So I think it's an interesting one, what he'll be able to do, because if he keeps coming up with comments like that, he'll lose the change room, and that will be the hardest thing for him. But certainly to their day, they were very poor in their defensive. The mistakes they were making, everything. Like Newcastle should have really won the game with the chances they had. I think Spurs were only in it because of Harry Kane. We just know how prolific he is. He gets a couple of chances, he scores goals. So I think Mourinho really needs to find a back four to settle on. He's chopped and changed too many times. I think that's probably what he's probably looking at that in training every day and saying, like, I can't get these defenders to do what I want. He keeps, like I said, chopping and changing. He can't find a good balance. So he needs to address that situation, whether or not they get to the summer and they look at, can we sign top class and have to kind of improve all of them. It would be interesting to see what he does.
Just one final thing then, David, to ask you about is League One. This is where we always finish, of course, on a Monday or Tuesday morning. Aidan McGeady with an 81st minute free kick yesterday against Peterborough. This is... we're talking about Jesse Lingard and resurgences in careers. I think people are enjoying what Aidan McGeady is doing this season. He's been brilliant for Sunderland. Their promotion hopes are still very much alive. Where does McGeady rank, I guess, David, in terms of the most talented players you've seen firsthand, and some of the most talented Irish players that we've had over the last few years?
Aidan's unbelievable. Honestly, it's people will look at it, but in training, if you remember the Georgia game, in the, I don't know, what's the 92nd minute, Aidan did the little, it's now renowned as the McGeady spin, and he slots the ball into the top corner with his left foot. Aidan did that on a regular in training. His ability, that I think one of the hardest things in football is that ability to beat someone 1v1. It's the winger out in the, he wants to eye up the fullback, take him on 1v1. Aidan has that in abundance. Now, of course, Aidan turned 35 the other day. Time isn't exactly on his side. He's had a wonderful career. He's definitely a gifted player. You look at when he first came into the Ireland scene, and he's played for that many years. I don't know exactly how many caps he has, but I know he's about 81, 82. Am I right saying that if you check?
93.
93. Okay, yeah. That will tell you, that he's been around for a long time. Of course, somebody will fight back that we didn't see enough of him in the Ireland shirt. Yes, there would have been key moments or key games where he's produced and performed. It would have, of course, liked to see it over a duration. Certainly, Aidan was an incredible player for Ireland and everything. Just for whatever reason, at the start of this season, it didn't exactly work out. imagine Aidan's very outspoken, speaks his mind, which I have no problem with. But there's no doubting his ability on the pitch. You see Lee Johnson come in, speak a few things round. What's he do? He brings McGeady straight back in, and you look at the success that they've had since Johnson came in and McGeady's come back into the team.
Yeah, roll on season 5 of Sunderland till I die, basically, is what I'm hearing. David Meyler, great stuff as ever. Thanks a million.
Cheers, guys.
David Meyler there on the line as ever, reflecting back on the weekend's Premier League and looking ahead to 2 cracking ties tonight in the Champions League. As I said, they both get underway at 8 o'clock. Right, it is 8:15, and we've got a packed show still to come here on OTB AM over the next little while. We're going to be hearing from Rassie Erasmus before 9:30 this morning. We've got the performance rankings after 9, and we're going to be talking rugby with Keith Wood shortly. We'll be back after this with Tuesday Sports Pages.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station. Off the ball.
For people to look at Roy Keane and say they're not going to take him because of what he might say as a pundit is ludicrous. It's ridiculous. How are you not going to have a player like that, a manager like that who's had the career he's had, and not try and tap into that to help your team? They're missing a trick. All of them who's not taking them. Missing a trick.
Off the ball. Weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Sean, what's that thing going round the garden?
That is our new Husqvarna auto mower.
Auto mower?
Yeah, it's a robotic lawnmower from Husqvarna. Cuts the grass automatically, has GPS tracking and an app. Even works in the rain. I just thought, why spend time cutting grass when I could spend it with the family?
Great! You can put the dinner on, so.
No can do, love. Have to paint the man cave.
Husqvarna auto mower. Never mow again. Learn more at husqvarna.ie.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, browse through dozens of new player markets, all powered by Opta. Shots on target, left foot, right foot, headed goals, assists and more. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
You're welcome back. 17 minutes past 8 on this Tuesday morning. Let's run you through some of the sports pages this morning. And as ever, we'll start with otbsports.com. Tottenham players fed up with Mourinho criticism is a latest report, I think, coming from the Daily Telegraph over the past couple of days. Reports as well that Julian Nagelsmann might be the man to step up and take the job should Jose Mourinho get pushed out the door this summer. Meanwhile, Cardiff's 5-0 hammering at Sheffield Wednesday, a humbling experience for Mick McCarthy. On the racing, we could walk him home. McLaughlin savours freewheeling Dylan's grand national victory, an unbelievable 150-1 shot win yesterday. Meanwhile, Real Madrid announced squad to face Liverpool, and a report of Dublin being the shakiest of Euros 2020's host cities. The Irish Times leads with the rugby this morning. Contepomi focused on getting players into Leinster mode. The backs coach says the challenge couldn't be greater than facing champions Exeter in their own backyard. The back page of the Irish Independent focuses on that Jose story. Mourinho on brink as Spurs players tire of blame game. Dressing room discord grows in the wake of criticism, with Nagelsmann a likely replacement. The Daily Telegraph leads with a photograph of Jesse Lingard, a goal and an assist last night for him. Lingard puts hammers in sight of Europe, but their main story there is another West Ham player. Rice injury sparks Euro's fear. He is now in a race to be fit for Euro 2020. The Irish Daily Star goes with the headline, Made Men. Klopp says Reds built for games like Madrid battles. And a photograph there of Ricky Doyle celebrating with big outsider Freewheeling Dylan after yesterday's Irish Grand National success at Fairyhouse. The Irish Sun says Peaky Blinder. Erling on his first look at the Etihad. It's beautiful. And Pep says even a blind man can see how good he is. The Irish Mirror go with the headline, It's for real. Klopp, this game is made for us. We'll go for broke up front, suggesting maybe they could play Jota as well as Firmino, Mane and Salah. The back of the London Times then says Klopp vows to take the fight to Real. Liverpool manager says he is happy to be part of the underdog team, and Lingard scores solo stunner. That was the other facet of last night, an unbelievable goal. It was the quality of the goal, the run from Jesse Lingard, and the run from Mikhail Antonio as well to create the space for him, pretty good. At the back of The Guardian is Lingard as well, hammers in top 4 after nervy night. The Irish Daily Mail is a real chance. Klopp eyes win over side who haunted Reds. That's a nod to 2018. The Herald has more Liverpool. Klopp, it's not about revenge. Liverpool boss doesn't need motivation for Madrid clash. And then finally, the Irish Examiner. Real clash, no revenge mission for Liverpool, says Klopp. You've got more from Felipe Contepomi, more on Toulouse against Munster, which we'll get to very shortly with Keith Wood indeed. And the other story here on the front of the Irish Examiner sports section focuses on GAA. Fitzmaurice, GAA should consider delaying Dublin's return to training after breach. This is Eamon Fitzmaurice, former All-Ireland winning Kerry manager. He's been speaking on the Irish Examiner GAA podcast, and he thinks that the 12-week ban that Dublin handed down to Dessie Farrell is not enough. He's taken one for the team, he says. The punishment that I thought would have been more, I don't say appropriate, but certainly would hurt the group more, is that when everybody is back training, that they weren't allowed back training for a week or two. So Fitzmaurice is suggesting that this might have been a more suitable punishment, or could yet be a punishment if the GAA at central level want to get involved. That if they have to take a few weeks of a break while everybody else gets back to training legally and by the rules, then he feels that would be a more suitable punishment. I'm not sure how much the top brass would have an appetite for that, or how easy it would be to police in any way. He says he feels sorry for Dessie Farrell, that it's going to be a tough 12 weeks for him during the suspension. He'll still be able to have an influence, though, he says, and he goes on to say that maybe something heavier should have been handed down. I know Colin Cooper's come out over the past couple of days and slammed Dublin as well. Shane, I'm not sure what you think about this, but is it not a case of job done already, that the Dubs have already handed out their 12-week ban, and because of the fact that Paddy Talley and Ronan McCarthy have received similar bans, the GAA can't necessarily do anything more, that the Dubs have essentially snookered them?
I think the question, and Eamon Fitzmaurice rightly brings it up, is how long has this been going on? Do you know, if Dublin have been training for the last 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 weeks in this way, and it's only now that they've been quote-unquote caught, then yeah, perhaps maybe there needs to be a more serious punishment. But, Eamon suggests, I guess, stopping Dublin from going back to training before other counties, and as he mentions himself, that's a very, very difficult thing to police. And stopping players training and stopping teams training is not an easy thing to do. So, his sentiment is right in that, of course, an example needs to be made of Dublin. And a lot of people speaking over the weekend about the fact that this is important because it is Dublin. And we're all surprised. I know Tommy Martin and Michael Verney talking on the paper review on Sunday with John. We're surprised that Dublin were caught. It's just not a Dublin thing to do. So it's strange in that regard. And like Eamon goes on to say that, he knows Kerry aren't training at the moment. And he'd be surprised if many other counties were. I mean, we all hear anecdotally rumours of certain counties being back. But the fact of the matter is, we don't know who's back. We don't know who's not. Perhaps some counties have been training for the last 6 weeks, and we don't know. And Dublin is just the one that gets the ball rolling and the headline that starts this conversation. But certainly, if it does emerge that they've been training for, as Eamon suggests, maybe that it could come out that they were training for longer, then maybe, a punishment slightly longer would benefit the whole situation, I think.
Because that definitely seemed to be the tone last week, that the Dubs were the ones that got caught, but everybody's at it. Like, Fitzmaurice seems to know pretty well here, and you can't doubt his sources that Kerry aren't gathering, for example. I think last week we were kind of making the point that we just don't know. That's, personally, I was under the assumption that most county teams were just back training on this line, that Dublin were unlucky or maybe a little bit foolish to be the ones that got caught. I do think there's a sense of it being in a more built-up area than most of the other counties in Ireland will be training in, and most counties can train on the side of a mountain, whereas Dublin can't necessarily do that. They'd be in a built-up area, and that's why they got caught. So it is surprising that he does believe that there aren't other teams training, or that most other teams aren't training, because I thought the opposite might have actually been the case. And he says that when you're doing the right thing, then you almost feel like a bit of a fool. And that is maybe the issue here. But who's actually going to push this? Because, as you say, there is precedent. That's the problem. It's not like the Dubs have said 12 weeks and they've pulled it out of their backside and that's what they're going to run with. There is actual precedent of a 12-week ban for something that's very similar. So do they then have to go against the grain then to make an example of the Dubs? And is that fair? I'm not sure it is. I think that is then taking the idea of the Dubs being the most important team in GAA or the standard bearers and the example of the GAA to a literal level, to say that they actually deserve a heavier punishment than what Cork and Down were given, and I'm not sure that's fair either.
Yeah, and like there is a holier than thou kind of sentiment around the whole thing, and I was surprised too to read Eamon talking about Kerry not being back training. Not that I thought Kerry were back training, but we all hear anecdotally rumours of counties around the country being back training, and on paper, of course they shouldn't be back in groups, but if the GAA want to get on with the league as planned, you have a county like my own county in Monaghan in a group with Donegal, Tyrone and Armagh. And Tyrone and Armagh will be back training much earlier, of course, because of the vaccine situation up the north and teams being allowed to go back training a bit earlier. So, especially counties in Ulster who have to play counties among the six, that's something that's in the back of their minds, that why wouldn't we start a bit earlier to keep up at the very least with these other counties who are back training. So it's a strange one, it's a difficult one, and Dublin being caught has only really just started this conversation. But I don't think anyone thinks realistically that other counties haven't been at it for the last 5 or 6 weeks. No, for sure. But it's worth checking out that piece with Eamon Fitzmaurice in the Irish Examiner this morning. Right, we're turning our attention back to rugby at 8:25 on this Tuesday morning. The big result from an Irish standpoint at the weekend was Munster 33, Toulouse 40. Keith Wood, you were on live commentary duty for News Talk and for Off the Ball throughout Saturday afternoon. Having had a couple of days to digest that, are you feeling more positive or more negative about life?
Maybe a little bit more negative. I was very positive for the performance, for the manner in which the team played. I thought they had a go consistently. They mixed the game up incredibly well. They played territory at times when they should have. Keith Earls was on fire. Damien Dialende in the first half was fantastic, as was Conor Murray. Gavin Coombs was excellent throughout. I thought there was an awful lot to like for the manner and how they played. I didn't enjoy the game watching it because I felt as if we were on the cusp of falling over 3 or 4 times, and Toulouse are pretty extraordinary, I have to say. They have great strength and depth, but in 9 and 10 they had 2 guys who pretty much controlled an awful lot of the game, but they had talent everywhere, and so it made it incredibly difficult for Munster. Toulouse reaction after the game was extraordinary. It was as if this was a monkey off their back. They considered the Munster scalp to be a huge one, and were thrilled with it. But I was disappointed at the very end because I thought Munster were still well in the game, but the second half wasn't good enough, really.
When it comes to that situation in that second half, about 60 minutes in, and the game is really in the balance, Keith, what do you expect to see from Munster to ensure that the 50-50 start going their way and that they do get over the line in that situation?
Yeah, I think that's I'm maybe not going to answer that question, actually. I think it's almost like a different view. For Munster to fully be able to compete at this, when you looked at the quality that came off the Toulouse bench, you can't be waiting for the last 20 minutes. You need to take whatever opportunity that you have at hand. And I still felt that for a lot of the game, when Munster got just outside the 22, they kicked the ball away, or they eschewed overlap opportunities. And you need to be able to take all of them at that level. And that just didn't happen. And for me, an awful lot of that comes down to the fact that that's not how Munster have played for most of the season. So most of the season they've played hard driving maul, one-out runners, kicking game, and that has been more than good enough to beat some of the poor quality of opposition that there is in the Pro 14. When you get to the big games, you need to do an awful lot more. So I kind of look at the last 2 weeks as a view of the season. So playing against Leinster, and Leinster, being the far better side at the present moment in time, but Munster didn't fire a shot. They did fire a shot at the weekend. So I was happier that they didn't kind of curl into a ball, and they were thereabouts. And it's about maybe playing that style far more often during the year, so that you're able to do it on those big days, because the other ones are efficient. Pro 14 is poor, and the manner Munster can win most of those games, as they showed this year, and they can do it. But that style of rugby isn't good enough to get you over some of these big European teams.
So that's objective number one, I presume, from your perspective, looking at the Rainbow Cup and looking at the start of next season, that this coaching ticket need to get the positives from that Toulouse performance and do it week in, week out when the games seem a little more meaningless.
Yeah, well, I think so. And it becomes very hard. I mean, I was listening to Johan van Gran, and I didn't like what he said after the Leinster game. He said, look, Leinster are just almost impossible to beat at the moment. Well, then you have to play very differently than we have been, because that needs to happen. He came out after this game and was very supportive of his team and his players and how they played, as he should be, because I have to say there were times in that game when it looked like Toulouse could have run away with it, and they are a pretty phenomenal team. So, I think the positives that you take from it are you have to try and have a style that suits the players that you have. And I think he would have said that. He would say that consistently, that these are maybe some of the skills aren't quite at the level that you'd want. Well, then we need to improve those skills pretty rapidly, because we can't go down the line of, I would say, playing a South African style of rugby, because we don't have the size of players to do that. So that doesn't suit us, and definitely doesn't suit us at the moment.
Except if they bring in those types of players, and bringing in someone like Jason Jenkins, does that then signal a worry for you, Keith, that this is the way that Munster perhaps want to play as the years go by?
It absolutely does. I can understand the rationale, and I said this the other day, you can have a rationale to pick a whole variety of different players to come in, but the idea is for Munster, for the most part, to be comprised of Munster players, and that hasn't been the case. So I think it's very hard to just criticise a coach, because a coach is inside doing his job. This is what he has to do for a period of time, and his reputation is built on the success that he has afterwards. And of course, there'll be a legacy element to it, and after he's gone or whenever he's gone, and of all the things that he has done within there. But for me, it feels like a structural problem for Munster, not a head coach problem. It's a need of having someone to hold the keys for Munster rugby in itself, so that you end up having a head coach that delivers for what the director of rugby wants, which has to have a big legacy for the game going forward. And I look at Munster, and they're infuriating and exciting beyond all belief. The ability to punch above their weight is pretty phenomenal. But Munster is built on three stools, three legs of a stool, which was the schools, the clubs, and the Munster professional game. Well, the clubs and the schools don't interact properly, and they don't interact with Munster. There needs to be some level of coordinated agreement between all of those, a summit, if you want, to try and bring them all together to say what do you want to get for each and what you want to get from Munster rugby, and to see how that works, because it hasn't worked. Because with the club game in particular being marginalised, that was the route for a huge amount of Munster players of the past to come through. So we often bemoan the fact that Leinster have all the great schools and all the players that are coming through. That's fine, but that's Leinster, that's a capital city. That will always be the case going forward, I would say. Munster need a Munster solution for a Munster problem. Need to be far more joined up between the clubs, the schools and Munster.
Keith, just on that and the structural development, I was reading Brendan Fanning in the Sunday Independent, and he was saying, and I quote, if there were €600,000, for example, to replace CJ Stander with Peter Steph Dutoit, revised downwards to roughly half that for Jason Jenkins, why was there not enough cash to bump up the number of regional development officers in unproductive areas of the province? It's hard not to see sense in some of what Brendan is saying there.
Well, it is, and that's something that Munster will have to answer. So I think that's a good question to ask. When you look at Peter Steph Dutoit, I think that's a slightly different example, actually. So if you're looking for world-class players, Munster have always had guys that have been world-class, and either they're world-class in world rugby or have a world-class attitude. I'd go back to my day with John Langford. He had the best attitude of any trainer I've ever seen in my life. And he had the best attitude for any guy who stepped out. He wasn't the most talented, but he got absolutely the most out of his talent. Fantastic line-out player, fantastic rucker. Wasn't a ball handler of any. He'd slag me off for me slagging him off. But the reaction to the players around him was phenomenal, because he had he had an attitude that was world class. So I think it's brilliant having players from overseas, 2, 3, 4, if you can, and if you can afford them, well, great. But for the most part, Munster needs to be built from mostly Munster players. And it's fine taking guys from Leinster from time to time, but that can't be the model going forward because you tend to lose your identity. And if you look at, I think, what's happened in the last 4 or 5 years, about 40% of the players that have joined Munster in that period of time are from Munster. That number isn't high enough. That needs to be 80%. Now, it may take a period of time to get there, but until such time as you drive that on, then, or discuss that or have a summit over it, I don't know that anything changes at all.
Most of those players are coming from a couple of schools as well in Munster. I know a high enough proportion of players. And you see, someone like Jack O'Donoghue from Waterford playing really well at the weekend as well. And is it just the case, Keith, that maybe they need to focus Munster on developing players in those counties like Waterford, like Kerry, where maybe they're not as big a rugby stronghold as Limerick or Cork, that maybe that the focus needs to be on those counties?
I don't think so, actually. I think there should be enough of focus and enough of rugby development officers and enough of focus on the wider Munster region. But we need to drive a huge amount more players through Limerick, through the Limerick schools. There have been no Limerick players in the academy with Craig Casey coming out of it. So, there needs to be a drive, lower, much younger, to try and get a lot of players available to play for Munster. I think that becomes one of the key parts of any business plan, actually, is not only do you get a lot more players, but you also get far more buy-in from the fans to say, well, these are one of our own, and they want to do that. And again, I'll say this isn't a xenophobic idea. I want to have 2 or 3 world-class players from around the world playing for Munster. Munster have always had that, in the professional era, and that's what it should be. But it needs to be the right and proper blend.
So when you talk about those traditional strongholds of Munster rugby, Keith, is it a case that because of club rugby dying on the vine, that pathway has just been totally eradicated? Is it as simple as that? Can you put it down to that one issue? Because it's interesting that you use the phrase joined up thinking. That would suggest to me that actually there is enough there for them to get more out of.
I think there's an awful lot in Munster. I think there's a lot of kids in Munster. There's a huge interest in playing. I think there has to be that strength of depth, and we have to maximise it. But I'd say if you're doing it with one arm behind your back, which, like the idea of getting the clubs to work, the clubs always worked. They were essential for Munster. They really were. And I know the club game has changed, and it is as if you're kind of looking back to the past. And I don't even know if this would be successful. I just think it needs to be something that we need to look at, because of all the teams, Munster's identity it's built around its history, it's built around its association with the clubs and the rivalry that happens between Limerick clubs and Cork clubs, and then Limerick and Cork clubs. Those rivalries lead to more players playing and more kids getting involved. So look, I can't say that I have a solution for this, but I think this needs to be discussed pretty quickly, because it needed to be discussed in the past, if we're honest. But you can't change the past, but you can change the future. You do need to sit down and have some level of conversation where you can maximise what we have. I don't think we're doing that at the moment.
When you say one hand is tied behind your back, what do you mean by that?
Well, I just don't think we're getting the best out of. If I called it the stool and the 3 legs of the stool, if we're not getting the best from the schools and we're not getting the best from the clubs, how really do you expect Munster to improve? So, I just don't think we are getting the best. I don't know that we're using all our resources well enough.
That conversation is one that obviously needs to happen and will continue for the next little while. There'll also be a hunger for some short-term change, Keith. At what point do you think the conversation around a coaching change is going to happen over the next little while? I think there's a sense that there's value in giving this coaching ticket one more full season at least, especially since there's been a few moving parts over the last couple of seasons. But those talks intensify when you see someone like Ronan O'Gara having such a brilliant season with La Rochelle. Does that affect your thinking?
It doesn't actually, and I actually like Ronan O'Gara is going off doing a job where he's trying to build his trade. Let him do his job. I mean, for Munster, for me, it still has to get around to an idea of a proper structure for Munster. So a director of rugby, I know it isn't the sort of panacea, but the idea of having somebody that's there that focus is not just on Saturday, but for the next 5, 7, 10 years, that becomes very important. You know, I think that's a bigger conversation than who is your head coach, because you want to have the freedom to be able to maximize the talent you have at your disposal. And I just think that needs to happen. And so for the present coaching ticket, I have seen improvements. I do see some changes. I would like to see more. And I would like to see, I'd like to stop our preponderance of kicking the ball away. I watch an awful lot of rugby, and ever since the European Cup in the middle of last year, the kind of delayed part of it, the style of the game has changed virtually everywhere. Munster haven't changed that as quickly, and I think that let us down a little on the weekend, and understandably, because we haven't been doing it that much. And I do believe that this is a process and it takes a period of time. So I absolutely give them another year, of course. That's their contract too. Let them get the benefit of it, and they may lose some games. That could be part of it, and that makes it really, really difficult, because when people are trying to protect their jobs, trying to look after what they're supposed to do, and their job is to try and get as many wins as possible. And at that point, Munster have done very well in the Pro 14 and have done pretty well in Munster, and yet they've been knocked out at this period of time. And there's no shame in that. For me, there was I was totally disheartened after the Leinster game, because I didn't think we played at all. But I wasn't disheartened after the Toulouse game. And actually, the manner in which we played, if we build on that, I think we become a better side.
So just to round it off on Munster then, Keith, it seems that you're thinking that maybe a more defined director of rugby with a clear path being given from that position towards the entirety of Munster rugby in terms of the style of play, in terms of the direction, is what's required, rather than more granular focus on the coaches or on the individual players for the time being.
Yeah, I do believe that is what's necessary. So, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that at all.
Keith, just on the remainder of the Heineken Champions Cup, and there's definitely a French flavour to the way this tournament is playing out. You know, Toulouse versus Clermont should be a cracker on Sunday. You've Bordeaux against Racing too, and Rog and co doing the business with La Rochelle. They play Sale on Saturday. So do you think there's a bit of pressure on Leinster now to deliver? But if you're the IRFU, looking at how this competition is playing out and the nature of the teams left, are you worried that the Irish game at all is remaining stagnant while the French game appears to flourish?
I think there's always ups and downs in who's top of the tree at different moments in time, and that happens. Like for 3 or 4 years it was Leinster, so I don't say you can say Leinster is stagnant. I think the Pro 14 has been pretty poor, and some of the standard has fallen away from that. I mean, look, we've had the craziest of results over the last 12 months. If you look at the manner in which Wales eked out a Six Nations victory, which is phenomenal for their ability to win those big games and ride their luck when they need to, but still have the courage of their convictions to score from pretty much anywhere, which they did do during the Six Nations. And then watch the way the Scarlets abdicated at the weekend. They were dreadful, and there were a huge amount of Welsh players playing on that. And I think the IRFU has, for the most part, got pretty much everything right in the last 20 years of professionalism. That the opportunity has been both for the provinces to try and be at the top table and to win, which they have done consistently, and for Ireland then to succeed, which they've never done consistently, and in the last 15 years have done a huge amount, which has been very impressive. It just changes all the time. Look, if you're looking at it, can we compete with on the salaries in French clubs, on the value that they have in keeping superannuated Kiwis up to 35, 36, 37 years of age to play for 20 minutes off a bench and have an impact? I don't think that that's viable within Ireland. So we need to maximise what we have, and we need to play a little bit smarter. we need to make certain that we are not falling into the trap of playing the large power game, that the only team really that does that in World Rugby is South Africa, and they do it incredibly well, but they've giants of men and we don't. So can we go down that line? I don't think so. I think if you look at one weekend, you can say, wow, the world has changed and all the French teams are flying. But you could have said the same about Irish teams 3 or 4 years ago. So I just think we're in a cycle, and in this particular cycle, there is money in the game in France. There isn't as much money in the game in the UK, and I think actually how the game survives over the next couple of years will be incredibly interesting. I would say that in the midst of COVID, the IRFU's reaction to the lack of income that's coming into the provinces was to make certain that the provinces were looked after, and I think they've done a really good job. The British government has given loans to the English clubs, which they'll have to pay off. That's not the situation that we have in Ireland. So I don't know how this is all going to shake up. We've had a very crazy 12 months, and I'm just happy that we're able to see the game on the television. I think there's something fantastic in that being able to happen, and there's a huge credit goes to all the people that have managed to stay in their bubbles and not have any transmission, really very, very limited within sport, not just rugby. So look, I think we need to look at and smile at some stages to certain things that happen, but also to have a little look and say that not everything is all bleak this week. But in these days, they're the times that you're looking to the future. You always have to look to the future, but then appreciate the good days. And if Leinster get have a great opportunity at the weekend, and if they can drive that on, that's going to be a cracker of a game. Two teams that really know how to play all styles of the game. So I'm looking forward to that too.
Just on that, and just while you're speaking, it struck me the fact that this was a cracking match of the weekend. 8 tries. You're looking at on the TV at the pictures and the sun beaming down on Thomond Park, and you're thinking, what an atmosphere this game would have had there been a crowd. I'm sure you don't get used to it, but Keith, as someone lucky enough to be on commentary and covering these games from inside the empty stadium, how did it feel? I'm just curious as to how it felt. I know you don't get used to it, but to be at a game that the atmosphere, just how different it would have been with fans. So it must have been a bit of an eerie, bizarre experience.
Oh, I don't like it. I find it incredibly off-putting. Your voice is louder. I think they can hear you when you're commentating on the pitch, which is kind of disconcerting. No, I don't like it at all. It's entirely wrong. And I have to say, and I'll go through this again and again, I'm pretty stunned by some of the levels of the performances that we've seen, because the players have got used to it and they've been well able to do it. And it took a while for them to get used to it, but some of the performances have been brilliant. And I also think it takes some of the pressure off the visiting teams. So home wins are not anywhere near as guaranteed as they were in previous quarterfinals or round of 16s or whatever we had. I know there's a change this year, but the intensity that you would expect to have in Thomond Park for a French team coming there, to the baying of blood almost for a ball that's kicked in the air, like that's missing. And I think I'm not saying they get an easier ride out of it, but it's not as intimidating. An empty stadium. I used to describe Lansdowne Road before it was torn down as a monument to grey. When it was empty, but it pulsed with life. When it was full, because it was a dreadful stadium in its last few years. It was falling apart. But full, it had a sound all of its own. Thomond Park has that, and it didn't have it at the weekend. It is eerie, it's uncomfortable, but look, it's what everybody is having to deal with at the moment. It's the least of the worries for people who are sick. So, I think we just take the joy for the fact that you can see rugby players out in the field.
You were watching Harlequins Ulster as well at the weekend, Keith, just to finish up on that one. How good were Ulster?
Ulster were good. It's funny, I was interested. The commentators were calling Harlequins abject, and they weren't. They picked a second team, maybe even a third team. 5 or 6 of the players hadn't played rugby for 14 months. And they said this is an opportunity to get them out there. They've put all their eggs in the basket of the Premiership and said they'll use the Challenge Cup to try and blood some players. It's a pretty steep learning curve when you put a load of kids who haven't played any rugby out onto a field against Ulster, who were really trying to put down a marker, and they did put down a marker. Lowry scored the most wonderful try. You see a lot of guys going for a step when they get a ball in space, and he didn't. He just pinned his ears back and scored in the corner. So there was a lot of joy in the manner in which they played too, which was good.
That back three for Ulster is pretty fun to watch. Like the Balakoon we've spoken about quite a bit over the last couple of months, but do you see Lowry having a future in the green jersey?
Yeah, it's hard, I think, because Lowry is small. And much and all, as I bemoan the fact that we're not talking about a huge power game or having huge forwards like they have in South Africa, it's harder for the small guy. You'd like to see him get a go. So if we look at Toulouse the other day, and we talked about a lot of their big second rows that came on and made a difference. But then you've Cheslin Colby, who is tiny and is pretty remarkable. So there is always a place. So all you want is an opportunity now and to see where it goes. But my God, he was quick the other day.
Yeah,
don't give him his pace anyway.
and any concern then for Leinster this week, Keith? I know we'll have plenty of build-up as the week goes on, but I know that the early signs are a week off might not help them, but surely with their squad, a few niggles and bruises will be cleared up.
Yeah, they've got a fairly big injury list of key players, which is very upsetting for them. And but they have a great squad. It's about getting a really good team on the field and having enough good guys to finish out the game at the end. So I'm looking forward to this game. It's kind of one of the joys. I sometimes don't like watching the team that I support. So. Like I often feel as if I'm getting an ulcer watching Ireland or Munster, but you can watch Leinster and say, yeah, we want them to win. We want them to have a go. And you're not that worried about it because you're not vested in it as such. I just think the manner in which they play, if they have a decent power game and are able to control enough of the game themselves, their targeting of ruck and turnover ball, which is essential for them, if they can stop Exeter with their pick and go and with their kicks in the corner, they have a very, very good chance. For an awful lot of this, it comes to stopping how Exeter play. But no, I'm looking forward to it as a game. I think they have, I still think that they have the ability to up it. Yeah. And actually, I'm disappointed for them they didn't get the game last weekend, because I think they could have needed a shock and an ability to go and up their game at that level. It just... You just give yourself fewer options when those games get called off. So it's I'd say they had a tough session over the weekend, though.
All right, Keith Wood, great stuff. Thanks a million.
Cheers, lads.
Keith Wood there on the line giving his take on Munster, the Leinster off week, and a bit on Ulster as well as they charge through to the next round of the Challenge Cup. Right, it is 8:52 AM on this Tuesday morning. You're watching OTB AM. It is live in association with Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette, giving you the confidence to tackle the day ahead. Now, we had the 2-2 draw between Spurs and Newcastle live on OTB on Sunday. Kenny Cunningham was on commentary duty, and afterwards he got talking about Harry Kane.
But I really feel as if with Kane, and it's not a criticism of Kane, I really feel as if those personal accolades in terms of what you've just said, all-time Premiership goal scorer, all-time England goal scorer. I think those two are massive drivers, maybe more than people say. People say, oh yeah, personal accolades are all very well and good, but it's all about trophies at the end of the day. Yeah, of course you want the trophies as well, but with Kane more so than any other player, centre forward for me, Nathan, of the last 20 years, I think that is a massive driver, those personal accolades. And like I said, if you look at it purely within that prism of top international English international goal scorer and Premiership goal scorer in 6 years' time, for me the argument becomes stronger. Stick where you are, stay where you are. Because his level drops at Tottenham, Nathan. His level has dropped at times over the time he's been there. He hasn't been 9 out of 10 every game for Tottenham over the past 6 years. Coming back from injury, it's taken him time to get back to his level, 4, 5, 6 games, and he's played. There's never been a cry, oh, Kane's got to come out of the team. His overperformance isn't good enough. It's not even discussed at Tottenham. But I tell you what, it would be a topic of discussion at Manchester United or Manchester City or Liverpool or these top clubs, and he might find himself on the touchline a little longer than he would expect. So that's the fascinating thing around him.
Yeah, Kenny Cunningham giving his take on Harry Kane in the aftermath of that 2-2 draw between Tottenham and Newcastle at the weekend. Right, at 6 minutes to 9 on this Tuesday morning, it is time for the performance rankings.
You know, that wasn't an All-Ireland winning performance.
Probably should have won the game based on their second half performance.
Is it a step too far to say it was the performance so far of the World Cup? Maybe not.
OTB AM's performance rankings with Gillette.
I'm scratching my head. That performance was just lacked that intensity.
Every week here on OTB AM on the Gillette Performance Rankings, we'll give you the chance to win a Gillette starter pack. All you have to do is send us in your suggestions for the performance rankings. You can enter on our Instagram or tweet us at Off The Ball, and we'll bring you our winner a little later this morning. So for those people who are new to this, we've got a couple of poor performers on the weekend, a couple of good performers on the weekend, and a grand performer from the weekend. So where are we starting, Shane?
Well, I'm sorry, Eoin. We have to start with a poor performer, and it's your own team, Arsenal. Your boys took one hell of a beating, Eoin, let me tell you, against Liverpool at the weekend. A dismal performance, it has to be said. And a lack of application, I think, mentioned by Gary Neville on Monday Night Football last night from the likes of Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang and Nicolas Pepe. He called them a joke, and it's hard to disagree. Now, Arsenal without, of course, Smith Rowe, no Saka either, but they look brutal. And Kieran Tierney, for his injury worry now to be playing on the minds of Arsenal fans is the last thing they want. The only thing you can say in Arsenal's favour, they have a relatively kind fixture schedule between now and the end of the Premier League season. They've of course got the Europa League to contend with as well in their hunt for a trophy, but in the remaining 8 games in the league, you know, even if they win a few of those, you still see them dropping some points. And really, Arsenal are a mid-table team right now, so the league table does not lie. Gary Neville said it looked like a group of players who weren't comfortable, like there was a disconnect between them and the manager. This is for the Liverpool game at the weekend. The manager looked like he'd had enough of them. He had that glazed eye look. It's instinct. We've been around football for long enough to know when a group of players are disinterested. There was, of course, the decision to drop Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang last month for the North London derby after he reported late for training. So we had to start really, Eoin, with the negative story around Arsenal.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, how can you expect to get up for a game against Liverpool when you've got the mighty Slavia Prague coming to town on Thursday? That is where all attention lies at this point. The Aubameyang thing is quite funny at this point, that we all thought that this was a big deal, that Aubameyang getting dropped by Arsenal was a risk and a gamble by Mikel Arteta before such a big game. It wasn't a gamble at all. I think the more time passes, the more we realise that Mikel Arteta could afford to drop Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang for that game for one reason and one reason only. It's because Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang is not very good at football at the moment, and it wasn't a risk whatsoever. The gap between himself and Alexandre Lacazette has narrowed to the point where it's a shrug of the shoulders who's actually a better footballer at this point. You would like to think that Aubameyang will have a resurgence next season or at some point, but there have been many footballers that we've seen that just lose that spark, and they lose it permanently. Jamie Carragher was making the point last night that this could be another Mesut Ozil situation at Arsenal, which is quite a dramatic prospect, I guess, for the football club, that their captain will go in a similar manner to Mesut Ozil, that he might drift away from the starting team. I'm not sure if that's necessarily going to happen, but it's been an absolute disaster of a season for him, which epitomises, I guess, where Arsenal are, which is a mid-table side, as you see. I do think that they're trending, or they have trended at times in the right direction this season, but they've just had a few individual performers that you would expect a hell of a lot more from, and they've just been so disappointing. And also, I mean, their inability to pass out from the back without a complete catastrophe happening in pretty much every game at this point is something that is starting to bite them with more regularity at this point, which is the biggest concern I would have, that this style of play that has been implemented under Mikel Arteta, you would have thought would have teething problems at the start, which it did, but it seems that things are getting worse in certain departments, which is passing the ball out from the back at the moment. So very worrying times, even though, as you say, the likes of Saka and Emile Smith-Rowe, who were absent at the weekend, have been brilliant all season and represent hope. There are many other points where you're like, God, there is no guarantee that Arsenal do get out of their mid-table slumber next season. So you're right, poor performers. But they're not alone in the red this week, Shane. No, big time. Poor performance from Mick McCarthy as well. What a shocker they had. The struggling Sheffield Wednesday, stunning mixed playoff hopefuls Cardiff City. A 5-0 win at Hillsborough. So that lifts Sheffield Wednesday off the foot of the table. But for Mick McCarthy, he must have been shell-shocked, because 3 of these goals came in the first 23 minutes. Julian Borner, Callum Patterson and Adam Reach on target for Wednesday.
and a fairly miserable Easter, all in all, for Mick McCarthy. They had a 1-0 defeat at home to Nottingham Forest on Friday. So Cardiff now at 8th place, 8th place in the Championship table, 8 points behind Reading, who currently fill the last of those playoff spots. And it was one of those games where Mick panicked. You know, you see a manager panic and he makes a triple substitution in the 72nd minute. His hand was forced, obviously, but it was too little too late. And really, Eoin, I mean, an initial good run of form since he took over in January. They've now just one win in 6. And Mick, speaking afterwards, he said it was a humbling experience this evening, that's for sure. The first goal set them up with a bit more confidence than they would have done. Having watched it back, we should have defended it better. Let's put it that way. That's disappointing. So a really, really poor performance. And football moves quickly, and it really catches up with you, because a couple of months ago, at the start of his tenure, we're saying, what a performance by Mick McCarthy. He's doing incredible things at Cardiff, and now it's reality has bit him in the arse. So it's a tough one for Mick to take, I'm sure.
Yeah, and all the talk last week of the best Republic of Ireland managers that we've had in recent years. There's a certain manager doing so well at Cardiff City, and it seems that changes as well pretty quickly. Like, I mean, if he gets them into the playoffs, it's obviously a very successful season, you would have thought, from Cardiff City's standpoint, but it's just 8 points now at this point, which is just not something that you can see happening. It's like, as soon as that longer term contract was handed out to Mick McCarthy, it seemed that not long after that, that's when things started to take a little bit of a spiral for him. But hopefully he does. Like, I want to see Mick McCarthy in the playoffs. I want to see the story. Like, I mean, this is the theme of this morning. Like the Jesse Lingard comeback, the Mick McCarthy comeback. These are the things that we want to see. And I don't think Reading are going to give way on that 8-point gap at this point. I think Bournemouth, if anybody, are going to slip into the playoffs if it's going to change at this point. And in an unusual state of play for the Championship, it looks like the playoffs could actually be sorted earlier than we think. Usually anybody down to like 12th could be in with a shout of making the playoffs. But it looks like there's already a bit of a gap opening between 7th and 8th at this point, where Bournemouth, as I say, could be the only ones that get in. So, yeah, not a great weekend for Mick McCarthy. But we're moving on to the grand performance, and I guess this is kind of greatness mixed with mediocrity, Shane, but this is the highlight of the morning for you to talk about this.
Oh, any excuse to talk about snooker, Eoin, you know I will do it. And yeah, let's talk about Stephen Hendry and Jimmy White, because the two of them played last night in a World Championship first round qualifier. So this takes place at the English Institute of Sport in Sheffield. You have to go through 3 rounds of the qualifying to get to the first round proper of the Crucible, which gets underway in a couple of weeks' time. 17 days of action at the Crucible. But just what a rivalry. Stephen Hendry and Jimmy White, to see them in action last night. I mentioned earlier, you know, Stephen's put on a bit of timber. Jimmy looks a bit different as well. They're not the young, fresh kids that they used to be, but what a rivalry they have. First met at the World Championships in 1990. Jimmy White won on that occasion. But Stephen Hendry would go on to beat Jimmy White in 4 World Finals. In 1992, Jimmy White essentially had his victory speech written. He was 14-8 up in frames in a race to 18 before he went on a night out, came back the next day. Hendry won 10 frames in a row to win 18-14. And that was just the start of it in terms of pain and, you know, the pain that was brought upon Jimmy White by Stephen Hendry, because in 1993 then, Hendry beat White 18-5 with a session to spare. So absolutely demolished him in a World Snooker final. And then in 1994, 17-all, deciding frame. Jimmy White has a black off the spot, and he kind of jerked his arm a little bit and missed. And of course, Stephen Hendry cleared up. He never allowed chances like that to go amiss. They were practice partners in the lead up to this tournament and these qualifiers in recent years. In recent months, they've been practice partners. And Jimmy White apparently has been getting the better of him in practice. But last night, Hendry was the one who got the better of White. 6 frames to 3 it finished. There was the commentators on Eurosport last night saying Hendry was almost like a Bond villain for a while. The difference, though, is that Bond usually ultimately prevails, and Jimmy White usually doesn't prevail when it comes to matches between himself and Stephen Hendry. So you just had this image of Stephen Hendry sitting in the corner like Blofeld stroking his white Persian cat. But of course, he was holding a cue instead of a cat. But a scary figure when you see him sitting there. Steely determination. But to see Stephen Hendry out of retirement is quite surprising. We've got a video clip here now. This is from myself speaking with Hendry back in May 2018. So you're talking 3 years ago. I did not think back then, and neither did Stephen, that a return like this would be on the cards. So he told me that retirement decision he made in 2012 was not one he had taken lightly. Have a listen.
No, not at all. There was various reasons, but yeah, no, I mean, every now and then I look back and I say, yeah, I do sometimes regret it, because we're sitting in the crucible now, and I'd love to be, getting ready, be on the practice table now, getting ready to come out and play in a semi-final World Championship. You're never going to stop missing that. But what I couldn't do is struggle to do was play the 5-6 hours a day practice that was required to be able to compete. So yeah, although I miss being out here with a cue in my hand, it's never going to happen because I'm never going to be able to do what's required to get me there.
Yeah, he told us it's never going to happen. He lied because it did happen. He ended up getting back to the point where he could practice again. The quality, though, Owen, was fairly abysmal. One of the frames was won with the highest break of 7 by Stephen Hendry, which is pretty much a break that I could accomplish, which says enough. We've got a few tweets here from a couple of people that were watching that we'll start with Mark Williams, and I think these sum up the quality. Mark Williams says, I enjoyed watching the Jimmy and Hendry match. It brought back memories, but I cannot watch anymore. Mark Williams inevitably turning off the screen. He could not bear to watch the lack of quality. We've got one from Dennis Taylor as well, the 1985 world champion. I enjoyed watching two of the great legends of our game. A lot of mistakes, although frame 6 was vintage. Well played, Stephen. Unlucky, Jimmy. Someone replied, which one do you fancy a crack at in the seniors, DT? Dennis says, doesn't matter who, Jason. You know me. 10 minutes practice and I'm ready for anyone. I'll be going for a shot at the championship again. Almost dislocated my shoulder with that screw back in the UK seniors. So Dennis Taylor having a bit of crack with people on Twitter last night. Someone else, Archibald at Penguin7874 says, they look like two people dragged in off the street and asked to pretend to be snooker players, which I thought was particularly harsh, but not exactly inaccurate. And then Paul McBennett, they should fire on the jukebox, disco lights, and have an old boy firing out a loud fart every 8 minutes on the next table, and it's a Monday night club league game. I've been in those clubs, in snooker clubs and snooker halls in Dublin, and indeed in Monaghan, and that's exactly what it's like, to be fair. So that's the lack of quality that was on show last night. So quite disappointing. An 11:43 p.m. finish. Hendry's cue action has slowed down massively, Owen, and the backswing is quite slow. But there were a couple of frames and people getting flashbacks. Frame 7, Jimmy White makes a break of 58, and then he misses a red to the middle, and Hendry clears up. So a fairly disappointing one for Jimmy White. And what happens from here then? Hendry plays Zhu Si, the Chinese player, on Wednesday in round 2. Jimmy White likely loses his tour card, unfortunately, but Barry Hearn will likely give him a 2-year invitational card, and he'd be silly not to. Ken Doherty actually is in action this morning in the first round of the qualifiers. He takes on Lee Walker. But it's an interesting one, and we've got other matches as well. They were pointing out in Eurosport last night that Gerard Green could play Jordan Brown, which is what you'd call a 7-pointer. Green, of course, worth 3 and Brown worth 4. So, just snooker jokes aside, can we just appreciate for 1 minute? Let's forget about the lack of quality here and just appreciate what these two have done for us. We've got a photo up on screen now of these lads in their old prime when they started playing against each other, and then one now. And you just see how long, it kind of just sums up how long these lads have been in action. So you have to have respect for the two of them. Everyone gets older, and we should just thank these two for the entertainment they've brought to us over the last number of decades. Jimmy White and Stephen Hendry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like the first lockdown, except the nostalgia is actually happening in front of our eyes in real time, and we realise actually things maybe weren't what they seemed, or actually, you know what, nostalgia is a little bit overrated anyway. Maybe that's what everybody's realised after last night as well, with two greats going toe to toe. We're into the green, Shane. Things get a little bit better here.
Yeah, let's start with Callum Robinson, I think, because what a weekend he had. 5 goals in the Premier League. He scored for West Brom, and all 5 against Chelsea. He just loves playing against Chelsea. And a 14-match unbeaten streak for Thomas Tuchel and Chelsea coming to a spectacular end. Thiago Silva sent off after around half an hour in that game, picked up 2 yellow cards. So around an hour with 10 men. But what a performance from Callum Robinson. And he took the goals remarkably well as well, I think you'll agree, Owen. And, we had the text in at the start from Isel Cody talking about the Monaghan links. And yes, he does have Monaghan links. It was his grandmother, Anne Deehan, moved to the English Midlands from Monaghan nearly 50 years ago. She settled into a marriage, started a family. It was actually quite a sad story because she was killed in a car accident. And when her daughter Claire, Callum's mother, was just 9 years old. So her husband then remarried, and the family kind of reshaped and had a new life over in the Midlands. But an extraordinary backstory, and I'm sure his mother would have been, and his grandmother would have been remarkably proud of him at the weekend, because he put in a serious performance. I guess Irish fans are looking on at these games with Callum Robinson scoring goals and thinking, if only we could get some of that performance at international level. But then again, it might be just the delivery and I guess, the ball's in, he's getting the assists, he's getting given to him. So he's a cracking player. Maybe we just need to always play teams wearing blue in order for Callum Robinson to perform at the highest level for Ireland.
Yeah, like that's absolutely it. That I think you've nailed it there. Just it's a shame that Portugal don't wear those colours. Like Sam Allardyce literally has his feet up at the end of the game. Is the striking image I have, like just absolutely chuffed to the gills, as if somebody's just delivered a fresh pint of wine to his table. Sam Allardyce beaming like a Cheshire cat. Unbelievable scenes that like Callum Robinson maybe doesn't even get onto the pitch unless Darragh O'Shea gets injured, and then Branislav Ivanovic gets injured, and then Sam Allardyce actually decides, you know what, now is time to act. Now is the time for me to get an extra attacker onto the pitch. And was part of the transformation of the game. It does help that your totemic centre half in Thiago Silva isn't on the pitch anymore when you do enter the fray. But I love that performance, especially the two different types of finish they were. Like the first one, kind of late arrival into the box, which seems to be the only way that the Republic of Ireland can score at the moment or create chances at the moment. But then the second one, a little ball in behind. I mean, you can kind of play it both ways, really. Callum Robinson, no matter what sort of attacker he is for Ireland. And I think over the last couple of weeks, he's sort of nudged his way to the front of the queue now when it comes to Ireland's attackers. I think it's quite clear to everybody that he is more ready than Connolly is. Then I know Adamine has been injured, but more ready than he would be as well, and obviously more ready than Parrott, who's very, very young. And it kind of comes back to this lost generation that we've been speaking about so much over the last little while, that one of the few exceptions to that rule had been Callum Robinson. He's of an age that he's not really the same age as many other people in that Ireland squad. He's come through and is kind of hitting the prime of his life at the moment. It's just a shame, as you say, that he can't play Chelsea every week. Like, this was also like absolutely shattering from a Chelsea standpoint. And like, I don't know, does the international break just completely tear up all sort of momentum, where I was definitely like, I wasn't giving West Ham any chance of qualifying for the Champions League next season, not because of them or because of what I expect them to do, but because of how good Chelsea looked, and that there just wouldn't be enough places between themselves and Manchester United and Leicester. And when Liverpool have their end of season form, which will boil to maybe a good challenge as well. Whereas now, after what happened on Saturday and West Brom putting 5 past Chelsea, I'm like, anything could happen this season. Maybe Liverpool get distracted and maybe West Ham actually do waltz in and grab a Champions League spot.
Yeah, an extraordinary performance. And we got a little bit worried when we saw Didsy McGoldrick retiring from international level, but to see someone like Callum Robinson do what he's doing, and look, gone are the days where we have players playing regularly for Liverpool and Manchester United and Arsenal and Chelsea in the Premier League at the top tier, but to see someone like Callum Robinson play like he is at the top level and score those 2 goals. The first goal was just extraordinary. The late arrival, as you said, and the volley into the top corner, taken like a player who hadn't come off the bench for a start, and taken like a player who's played regularly and got loads of game time. He said afterwards that the international break gave him that bit of confidence, that getting those games under his belt really, really helped. If only he could have maybe hit the back of the net at international level. But look, those goals will come for Ireland. So we had to have Callum Robinson there as one of the good performances in our performance rankings this morning at OTB AM. Freewheeling Dylan, then, the man, or the horse rather, on the back page of a lot of the papers. We just got confused with the Bob Dylan song there and got carried away. But what a race! What an Irish Grand National yesterday. My brother works for a bookies, and he was saying that one of his colleagues' nephews, I think it was, is 4 years old, was given €5, or maybe it was €10 pocket money for Easter. The Easter bunny obviously came and gave him this money. He picked a horse, a random horse, and it was Freewheeling Dylan he pointed at. €5 each way, and €910 that turned into. So what a I mean, 150 to 1. It was an extraordinary story as well. Ricky Doyle, the jockey, really, really good interview afterwards as well, but never passed the longest priced winner ever of the Irish Grand National, first run in 1870. So that'll tell you how impressive an achievement that is. And just for the local trainer as well, Dermot McLaughlin, an emotional victory. 62 years after his father Liam rode Kerfero to win this exact race. So really, really a touching story for them. There is a great video that we want to bring you now as well. This is the local trainer Dermot McLaughlin's cousin Ollie watching the final moments of that race yesterday. Have a look.
Please, for once, will this 150 to 1 shot actually get over the line? Like, you mentioned did you say it was your nephew, your 4-year-old nephew, or your?
No, sorry, it was a colleague of my brother's.
So my apologies. I just had I've also heard another story of somebody winning about 450 quid on this horse yesterday, again by the same logic of not much logic at all. I think it's more to do with the fact, I know somebody called Dylan, or my name is Dylan, and I know it's quite a popular name for babies in Ireland over the last 10 years. I think a lot of people might have actually had a punt on freewheeling Dylan yesterday and actually got a big return out of it. It was just absolutely incredible. Like the Grand National, I guess, is all about sometimes a flutter that you've got absolutely no logic behind. It is a time to actually back a horse on its name sometimes, and I'm sure there's plenty of people who were feeling like that spectator yesterday that we just saw, but you can't really beat that. That is it for the performance ranking. Shane, is it Freewheeling Dylan number 1?
Absolutely, pleased for once in my effing life. The quote of the day.
And big congratulations to Paddy Fahy. You have won a Gillette starter pack this Tuesday morning actually, on OTB AM. So Paddy nailed his performance rankings picks, and he even colour coded them. So here's what Paddy went with. He went for the brutal Aubameyang and a few more from the team. Can't disagree with you there. The bad Mourinho. Same coach, different players, to quote Jose himself. Fair going was Big Sam's West Brom. They were amazing. Bit harsh putting them in orange, but still fair going is probably the least you could say about them. The good was Jordan Spieth, who we haven't mentioned yet, Shane, but there will be Masters build-up here on OTB AM throughout the week. A lot of Golf Weekly love for Jordan Spieth over the course of the weekend. Been a while since he's won. And even better, says Paddy, Jota, 30 minutes play, gets man of the match. I sense a Liverpool fan there somewhere, but really Diogo Jota and his return to fitness has been a massive fill-up for Liverpool. We'll give you another chance to enter next Monday morning on OTB AM, but that is it for this week's Gillette Performance Rankings.
OTB AM's Performance Rankings with Gillette.
All right, let's tell you what's coming up on OTB Sports Radio throughout the day. From midday, we've got How's the Head with Alan Quinlan and Pat Short. From 1 o'clock then, it's OTB Gold with Jerry Eisenberg talking about Muhammad Ali. 3 o'clock then is Dadcast time. And then 4 o'clock is a career retrospective with Darren O'D. And then OTB Gold from 6 p.m. this evening is Ronnie Delaney. And as ever, 7 o'clock is When Off the Ball begins on your radio tonight. Plenty of reaction to a busy weekend sport, and a last minute preview as well ahead of a big night of the Champions League as well. Right, at 17 minutes past 9 on this Tuesday morning, we'll be hearing from Katie Walsh before 10 o'clock. But we're back after these with former Munster head coach and the South Africa director of rugby, Rassie Erasmus.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The Saturday panel on OTB.
And I find myself during commentary, sometimes a thread will appear in my mind and it'll be like a worm. It's there. I know this might happen and I've got it ready to go. And that would have been the nation holds its breath thing, because I couldn't have scripted that penalty in Genoa in 1990. And it just came to me in the moment. But it came to me because of all that I had done beforehand. And it was there ready to emerge at the right moment.
Don't miss the panel every Saturday afternoon on OTB Sports Radio. Tune in 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Check out the Boyle Sports app today for details on which football match is getting the no-lose treatment this week. Plus, browse through dozens of new player markets, all powered by Opta. Shots on target, left foot, right foot, headed goals, assists and more. See the Boyle Sports app for full T's and C's. Boyle Sports. This is betting. Gamble responsibly. See gamblingcare.ie 18+.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Erasmus is joining the online business leadership event, Leaders Lounge. Now, Leaders Lounge is an online interactive event designed for CEOs, for senior management professionals, business executives, and those in wider leadership, startup, and coaching roles. It's focused on the themes inspirational, situational, and transformational leadership, and attendees will gain unique insights from an incredible panel of guests, including Rassie himself, from Brian O'Driscoll as well, Lady Chanel McCoy, Joanne O'Riordan is going to be there, and of course, resident host Paul McGinley. For further information or to purchase tickets for this event, which takes place later this month, you can visit www.leaderslongelive.com. Rassie Erasmus, how are you? Good morning.
Good morning, Eoin. I'm good, thank you. It's great to chat. It's great to hear that accent again. I'm not so sure if you can still understand my accent, but I'm sure you'll get used to it. No, it's awesome to talk to you guys. And when I spoke to Paul, to Paul and to all the other guys, it's exciting times. And miss Ireland big time. And it's nice to hear you guys' voices again.
How has the last year been for you? Obviously, with the pandemic and with obviously sport being taken away from you, has it been a bit of a struggle, or have you been okay?
No, well, I think in South Africa, it's a bit different to our in Ireland and the rest of the world. We've got a population of 60 million people, so we were a bit nervous, and we've got different lockdown levels and stuff like you had. There's been a lot of people who lost their lives, and certainly in our rugby community, there's a lot of friends that passed away and that were really ill. Most of us had COVID and came through okay. But yes, it definitely influenced everything, your state of mind, the positivity. It was tough times, but I think the nice thing is the whole world are starting to stand together and try to make things work. I'm just in the rugby fraternity, how people are trying to get tournaments going without crowds. I think it shows that we can do things if we really rock bottom, and we have to find ways, which is a positive.
It definitely feels that way with the Lions tour at the moment, that maybe 2 months ago it felt that this thing was in a bit of jeopardy, whereas every week now there's a more positive story about this being a real proper Lions tour in South Africa this summer.
Yeah, it's great. Look, I must be honest with you. We were willing to play in Ireland, in Twickenham. We just wanted to, because for us, it's just a massive thing. I played my first game for South Africa against the Lions, and it's just unique. If it was played there, it would have still been unique. It would have been once in a lifetime that it would be played at home for the Lions. But having it here obviously is first prize. We're working really hard to try and see if we can get crowds in. But if we don't get crowds in, we've seen, you look at the Six Nations games, it was still exciting. It was still the end. You don't know who's winning. So, it's awesome that we're getting closer and closer, and it's becoming a reality.
When you look at the Six Nations over the past few weeks, do you see anything there in the British teams or in the Irish team that would worry you from a South African standpoint?
We definitely always worry. Look, when you put those nations together and you take the best of them, just playing against them individually, us having Scotland and Ireland in the World Cup in France is already, people talk about tough pools. Look what Scotland did in the Six Nations. Look what Ireland did. Our World Cup pool is going to be really tough. And then, you combine them now with England, and I know Wales is a really tough team. We had them in the semi-final, and we've been struggling the last couple of years. So if Warren gets his team selection right, and which he most of the time does, we're in for a tough time.
On the subject of the Six Nations, how long and hard did you have to think about potentially linking up with the Six Nations? I'm sure you were central to the thought process behind that. It looks like it's not going to happen now, but this idea of South Africa coming up and making it a Seven Nations, how close did that come to happening in your view?
No, I don't think I should comment on that one, because there's so many decision makers and processes that follow there, and we've got such a long-standing relationship with the Sunzar, Argentina, and New Zealand and Australia, and we're still playing the rugby championships. So we did move now to Pro 16 and Rainbow Cup, they call it, as this interim competition, but hopefully Pro 16 from September, October this year. So that our club side, our provincial side, we're fully up north now, but we still, 100% committed to the Sunzar deal. And, you never know in future, you never know how things pan out. It's certainly really more convenient for our viewers and for our players to travel with the same time zones and watch games at times that you, not in the morning at 7 or at 9, we can actually have a beer, enjoy the game. It's in the afternoon or the evening. So that's nice in the club and provincial side, but I don't have the info on where they are with the Six Nations and stuff like that.
That's totally fair. On those provincial teams then, how beneficial will that be from your standpoint, the fact that there will be this, Northern Hemisphere culture or that approach to games being brought into South Africa, while at the same time being able to play the All Blacks? I guess it is a brilliant way to be able to broaden your horizons and ensure that you've got an idea of what's going on in the world game.
Yeah, no, you're right. I think one of the positive spin-offs is definitely, that Super Rugby is an awesome competition, and I played in the first one back in 1994. I think they called it Super 10 still then, and it's an awesome competition. The players you play against, the individual talent, the X factor is just amazing. But then you get to you finish Super Rugby, and then you get the autumn or the incoming tours in June to us. Then you play, against Northern Hemisphere teams who's normally at the end of their season, you're in June after their Pro 16 or Premiership or whatever the case may be. And then, they're a bit tired and we're just getting up. And then normally we'll play the Rugby Championships, and then we'll tour the end of year tour in November or in your autumn series. And then we are a bit tired and flat, and you guys are in the middle of your season. So I think the thing that works out for us here is that, law interpretations, the trends that happen in the Northern Hemisphere, we'll experience that now in club rugby, in franchise rugby. So that's a positive, but we'll still have that flavor of the Suns are away, the X factor, that fast running rugby, which New Zealand and Australia and Argentina now also give. So yeah, I think we've got a bit of both worlds, but both those worlds are going to be tough. It's going to be tough.
You mentioned there that quite often from the Northern Hemisphere standpoint, the teams from the Southern Hemisphere come up in the autumn. They're a little bit tired, perhaps don't put in as great a performance as they might want. And one of those moments, I think you'll agree, was 2017 when Ireland hammered South Africa. I think it was the last time Ireland played South Africa. I remember you saying at the time that was the night where you decided, I have to go, and I have to go to South Africa and try and help them. From the outside looking in, it seems like job done. Winning a World Cup 2 years later, that is the turnaround complete. But is it job done? Is it still a work in progress?
No, the job is far from done. Just to clarify that, because I think it came across the wrong way there in terms of it was decided that was actually our last day at work for Munster when we watched that. So it was already settled that we're coming back. The IRFU was really good to me. David Nisiforo was really good to me. Our CEO, who's now passed away at Munster, he was awesome in giving me the chance to go back and be the director of rugby of South Africa, not the head coach. But when we were sitting there, we were sitting between the fans, and what we actually said to each other, which I think came across on the program, Chasing the Sun. I don't know who's watched that, but I think it came across that we said, this is the day where we want to go back and help South Africa. And what we actually said there is we must never forget the people's faces, because we were sitting between South African fans at the Aviva, and it was they were just dumbstruck. It was just quiet. And so we actually just said, listen, okay, this must never happen again, if you understand. Sure. And that's on the day that we decided we're going back. So yeah, that was a good experience to remember their faces and the shock in their faces, because you don't see that when you're on the field. And no, job's not done. We won the World Cup. We know we could have lost against Wales. We lost against the All Blacks in the first pool game. I think when you do what the All Blacks has done over the last 12 years, winning World Cups and consistently being number one, that's what we're striving towards. But we haven't played a game, so we've got a lot to do.
That idea of peaking at the World Cup is something that's really interesting to the Irish audience, obviously. It seems to be the moment when Ireland are at their lowest ebbs sometimes, and when the stakes are at their highest. You mentioned the Chasing the Sun documentary. The other, I think the big line from an Irish standpoint that came out from the Chasing the Sun documentary was before the Wales game, when you said that they're not softies, they're not like Ireland, which, to be fair, I don't think too many people in Ireland would disagree with you in the context of the World Cup, that sometimes maybe a bit of Irish softness does come through every 4 years.
Oh, I would actually disagree with that. And listen, I don't want to try and if people made up their opinion on what they've heard there, then I wouldn't try and convince them otherwise. But I think the people from Ireland who do know me know that I will never say something like that in a way that I'm meant to be negative, because what Irish people has done for me, what I've learned from Munster and Irish people overall in those 18 months were, I wouldn't have been the coach or half as successful. Not that I am really successful, but I would have been half as successful. Just to give context to that, Maybe I can. Maybe it helps for those who's a little bit upset with me. We were actually talking about the different souls of the different team. The French got a different soul, the way they operate. The England's got a different soul. And we were actually talking about Ireland, and we said they are so well drilled and they're so clinical, and we've coached there. These guys, they absolutely take ownership of the game. They will know exactly where to clean, when to clean. They're on top of their game. And we actually were going through all the team souls, and I actually said they are not like Ireland, meaning they are this structured team that builds phases and phases and phases. And then I said they are not softies. And I actually was talking about another team, which people can make up their mind what they. So I know Ireland's not softies. They beat us 39-0. So how can they be softies a year later? I rate Ireland. I've coached there. For me, the big thing that stands out there which I tried to apply here and which helped a little bit, is the fact that they have 160 professional players, man. And I think that's tough to peak in a World Cup year, because, you get 5 or 6 guys who lose form or, who gets injured, and all of a sudden you have the 4 scrum-offs at the four clubs, Munster and Leinster and so on. And all of a sudden now the other guy is just a new young guy who must now make it, and that might be in the World Cup year. So I just think their lack of numbers is really tough to make sure the right guys peak in that. But I mean, Andy and the boys will sort it out. I mean, he's been there with Joe for a while.
And the signs are encouraging after the end of this year's Six Nations for sure. That lack of numbers is really interesting. Was that something that you saw in microcosm during your time at Munster, that perhaps the playing group that was going to come through within the province maybe wasn't strong enough to win a European Cup, for example?
No, I actually thought the playing group that came through there was the Coombs and those guys, were the young guys when I was there. They're actually playing now, Gavin Coombs and those guys. Those were the academy boys when I was there. And you could see these guys were hell of a talented. And it was, for me, unbelievable how easy. It's actually, in South Africa, if you're a professional rugby player, and we had 1,100 at one stage, who's professional, that's their job. And I was so surprised with the Irish setup where you've got so many in academy, and then if you don't make it in academy, you go back to studying a teacher or normal day job. And the weirdest thing was the players wasn't upset when you told them, listen, you're not going to be a professional rugby player. In South Africa, or my previous experience, even myself as a player, it's a massive thing when somebody tells you you're not getting a contract, you're not going to be a professional rugby player. I mean, your whole world fall apart. And for me, the Irish people took it so professional, players specifically. It would have been a function, say goodbye to the guy, a few tears shed, and he goes on with his life. That was amazing for me. But I did feel the players are of a great standard, but I felt the numbers were lacking, especially because they were playing. I'm not just talking about Munster. I'm talking Leinster obviously has loads and loads and loads of players. But I mean, for Ireland, if they don't pick players from abroad, I thought there might be times that they struggle just because of the amount of players in Ireland. But David has done a great job in creating depth and switching players from province to province.
Outside of switching players from province to province, is there a fix that can see that playing pool swell over the next few years from your experience?
Well, I don't want to give advice or make me sound clever on a terrain that I'm not involved anymore. Because I mean, look at what they did in the Six Nations currently. And I think apart from Munster or how they played the weekend, I just think there's something there between Munster and Leinster. I never beat Leinster. I think we played them 4 times, beat them at Thomond, but we never beat them at Aviva or the RS. I don't know how you're going to create your squad depth if you only have the four provinces. But maybe selecting guys who are playing overseas. I don't know if that's an option. I'm not saying they should. David mustn't say Rassie must stay out of my business. You're just asking me, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I don't know of another option.
No, that's fair enough. Like, I mean, that conversation around overseas players always comes up, especially when a bad result happens here or there in the Six Nations. One of the things that obviously you did very successfully, and they're continuing to do very successfully at Munster at the moment, it seems, is to recruit from abroad. And the South African tint to Munster, Snyman, of course, is injured at the moment, and hopefully we'll see more of him next season. Damian De Allende has been good, and of course there's CJ Stander. That is the other way to help the standards rise in Munster, is to get these top-class players from abroad.
Yes, yeah, it is. I think the bad thing, there's good and bad of it all over the world in the different leagues. And I think the French is starting to get it right in the top 14, where they limit the amount of players that goes to a province. And I know David also, you know, if you want to get a foreign player in, you know, that's a hell of a process to do that. And just on that, you know, for example, in South Africa, in 14 provinces, I think there's 2 foreign players that plays. So, and there's about 450 players that plays abroad. So, I don't think it's a great thing for your competition, if for your national team, when, let's say, out of the lock positions, out of the 4 provinces, you know, 3 locks, Fadi, RG Snyman, okay, Jean Clint can qualify now, so he's Irish, but RG can't qualify, and I think you signed Jason Jenkins now. Yeah. So out of one of your best provinces, 3 of the lock positions are taken up already, and I think that will also smaller in your pool, make your pool a little bit, but it will strengthen your club. It will definitely strengthen your club, you know. So it's a difficult one to balance, and I think the French are starting to get it right.
Yeah, it is a balance, isn't it? Because it does seem that the standard can be, I guess, it can be like osmosis within the setup, that somebody's playing beside CJ Stander. Of course, they're going to get better. And of course, when he becomes a test player, it's amazing. I guess the most traumatic moment of your time at Munster, I mean, how you can even begin to describe what would have happened after Axel's passing away so soon into your tenure as somebody involved with Munster Rugby. Growing as a leader, growing as a man, how did that awful moment impact you in your growth as an individual?
No, apart from Axel, I must thank Munster and the Irish people for a hell of a lot of things. But the Axel passing away itself was just, you know, in South Africa, somebody passed away, you know, it's definitely sad, but you go and you do, and you bury the person, and it's a service, and you know, and you must try to go on with your life. And I've never experienced how we had to get him back, obviously, from France, you know, and from him driving there, and the people, the locals there in the village next to the road, and then the church service, and then at his house. And I remember all of us, you know, getting together in the pub there, and then the actual, you know, funeral. And then after that, for me, it was difficult to handle, but it was almost this warm feeling I was getting of these people are sad, and I'm also sad, but it's almost this, let's celebrate it, man. And he gave me a total different outlook on how you should see when people pass away, and it's not the same in South Africa. Not that I say it's bad, it's just the cultures are different. So personally, that for me was an unbelievable bad thing to experience, but a warm thing, something that sits always here in my heart and my mind. And then obviously then managing the situations around that, you know, just the maturity of players like Billy Holland and everybody from oldest to the youngest guy, still playing a match with, I think 2 or 3 days after the funeral, and getting a red card early in the match and still winning the match comfortably. You know, I think that also shows if you have one common cause and one common thing you play for, you can be really strong. And that game was definitely all out for Axel. And yeah, no, I don't want this to sound weird, but I was so proud to be part of what happened there, because it was also pure, man. It was also pure.
I don't think any Munster fan is going to forget that season afterwards, even in a hurry. It was amazing rugby. It was a tribute to Axel so brilliantly. How have you, what's your opinion on Munster's success thereafter? I mean, that season, your final season with Munster afterwards, I think it's a semi-final and it's a Pro 12 final. Obviously, they lost the Pro 14 final last week, and I think maybe if they get to a European Cup semi-final this year as well, they'd be doing pretty well. So have they progressed as quickly as you thought they might have done?
Yeah, look, when I was there, myself and Jacques, we were totally outplayed in the final of Pro 14, or was it Pro 12 then? It was
Pro 12, yeah.
Pro 12, yeah. I mean, the Scarlets just, I've never coached a team which got 50 points, and that was probably the closest to getting 50. So it was one of the first times when I thought, hell, yeah, what's happening here? They just had our number on the day. But the one thing I remember, I was so embarrassed about the fans, but nobody was, obviously people were upset, but there was the people, it was the weirdest thing to see people, I've never experienced that, almost not sympathizing, but trying to encourage you, not slanting you. That was interesting. And then the semi-final against Saracens. You know, we always heard of Saracens here, and we know there's a lot of South Africans, but we never experienced that, and that machine that they were and how they operate, and that defensive system that they use, and the subs that are all world class, and you know how they do things, and we were there in that game till I think minute 65, and then we experienced the typical Saracens. So that was a wake-up call for me. It certainly, I learned a lot there, but we obviously lost there. And I think Eoin and Stephen and Larkham and all the guys, I think they're definitely always improving. But I think there's a little bit of even when we were there, there's a little bit of a mental block against the Leinsters, and I guess they'll find a way. You know, Eoin's a great coach, and his assistants are awesome. So yeah, always watching the games and always rooting for them.
One last question, Johan, because I know we're right out of time. Would you consider coaching or even working in rugby in the Northern Hemisphere once again? I know your name's been linked with the England job over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no, we will definitely do that. The plan was always, guys, and I know a lot of people think it wasn't, but my wife and my 3 daughters went over with me to Ireland and into Irish schools, English schools, Afrikaans-speaking girls. I even have them now in English classes here because they did pretty well there. They really quickly adapted, and they helped us a lot. We wanted to stay there till I'm 50, get the passport, maybe get my children to study on that side. So, but then, you know, we got the opportunity to get back earlier and get involved with the national team. Yeah, you know, I definitely, before I stop coaching, will definitely want to try and get back there. And you know, children is almost 18, so they're movable. So let's see what happens.
You'll be free is the key point there. You've been listening to Rassie Erasmus, who is joining online business leadership event Leaders Lounge. Leaders Lounge is an online interactive event designed for CEOs, senior management professionals, business executives, and those in wider leadership, startup and coaching roles. Just to tell you again, the lineup, it is Rassie himself, Brian O'Driscoll, Lady Chanel McCoy, Joanna Reardon, and resident host Paul McGinley. And make sure to get on to leadersloungelive.com for further information and, of course, to get tickets for the event, which takes place later this month. Rassie Erasmus, great catching up with you. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you. And I'm following you guys as much as I can. Great job. Appreciate it.
Well, the Irish Grand National goes to post at Ferryhouse at 5 o'clock tomorrow. We're delighted to be joined by the former Irish Grand National winning jockey, Katie Walsh, to talk about the famous race and what it's like to win it. Katie, how are you?
John, not too bad. And yourself?
Yeah, great, thanks. 6 years ago, Thunder and Roses, a 20-1 outsider in the Irish Grand National. And what is it like to ride in this famous race? We're talking about Easter Monday, when the Rising was going on 105 years ago, Katie, we'd horse racing at Ferryhouse. It's been going a long time, this race. What is it like to ride in this great race?
You know, it's a race that every jockey wants to ride in. You know, the Irish National, is, as you say, is steeped in history, and it's a race that you just want to be a part of. And lucky enough, I've ridden in it a good few times for different trainers over the years, but lucky enough, I got the opportunity to ride the winner of it as well. So yeah, it's one of those standout races of the year, of the season, that you just want to be a part of. And it's definitely one that you would like to win.
Ferryhouse, what is it like to ride as a track?
Oh, it's beautiful. Yeah, it's a lovely track. Big, fair, galloping track, lovely fences, always extremely well presented, along with the track itself. You know, it takes a lot of jumping, but it is a lovely place to be when you're on a good jumper. And lovely width, the fences as well. And really and truly, there's never really any hard luck stories around Fairyhouse. You'll find, you usually on the trace track, the best horse will really always win, and that's always the results that everyone wants.
You won a Cheltenham Festival race on Poker de Sevilla in 2010 over long distance, Katie. Then you were third on Seabass in the Aintree Grand National a couple of years later. Did that give you the confidence when you're riding then in the Irish Grand National that you know what the conditions are like and you know what this kind of test is?
I don't think the distance, I never really thought about the distance when I was riding in Aintree or even the 4 mile. I mean, I knew it obviously, it's a long way, but I mean, every horse is different, and you have to be able to know the gallop that you're going, and if you're going too hard, you're going too quick, and what the ground is like. But John, that's the same if you're riding in a 2 mile bumper on soft to heavy ground. You know what I mean? You have to be able to make a decision to say, Jesus, these are going mad. Like, they're never going to get home, you know. And sometimes you're on something that is just finding it all so easy that it doesn't feel like you're going that quick, you know. So there's a lot of things going through your mind as a jockey. You know, you have to think, first of all, it's all about rhythm, really. When it comes to long distance chases, it's about getting the horse nice and relaxed, get him into a good rhythm, depending on the ground. But usually this time of the year, to be honest with you, the ground is always nearly on the nicer side now, as you'll see a lot of the tracks will start to water now to make sure they're getting all the good national hunt horses for the rest of the festivals. And, you know, you're just thinking about reserving as much energy as you can, because there is a lot of jumping. I mean, you want horses to jump well without being too over dramatic. You want them to something that can get from A to B as fast as possible and keep nothing too flashy. You know, once they're getting from A to B and reserving as much energy as they can, that really goes into a lot of the long distance chases, and that has a big part to play in when it comes to the last couple of furlongs. So it really depends on the type of horse that you're riding, and course form. Have they ran over this type of distance before? You know, that all comes into play. So every horse is different, and you have to ride them accordingly.
Did you get much advice from Ruby or Ted? Is there much discussion around a big race like that before you go into it?
I suppose for me, always those rides were always kind of last minute, really. You know, they were down the bottom end of the weights, and people were trying to get organised. So I was lucky enough that I could do the lighter weights, and that the opportunity came that morning, actually, for whenever the Dex was, Easter Monday. So Dex were probably the Friday, I would have thought, maybe 2 days before. So I remember being here in the kitchen, and the phone rang, and it was Eddie O'Leary's name came up on the phone, and I said, Jesus, I said, maybe he wants me to ride one of these in the National. And he asked me, he said, would you ride Thunder and Roses? I said, absolutely. I said, I'd love to, thank you very much. Of course I would. And then I hung up the phone, I looked up Thunder and Roses, you know. So, you know, when you get an opportunity to ride in a race like that, your answer is always going to be yes, really and truly, regardless of what it is. It's something that you really want to be part of. So, sure, then as soon as I hung up the phone, I started to make a few inquiries and see what was the best chance of getting around, first of all. And I suppose, as I said, you have to ride every horse accordingly.
Would you get that often, owners ringing you up and asking you to ride their horse?
No, I think just there was probably just so much going on with Jigginstown. They could have had, there was 3 of us going down to the last in Jigginstown Pullers. You know what I mean? I'm sure they were probably just trying to get organised themselves, you know. And I think toing and froing between Sandra and Eddie and whatnot. Maybe Eddie said, sure, I'll try Katie, or you try someone else. You know what I mean? That's, you know, when it comes to something like that it's not always the case. But I'll never forget his name coming up on the phone anyway, and I had a fair idea what he was asking me.
Did you feel the horse had a chance? 20-1 shot, had won at the course before, had disappointed at Cheltenham. Do you do much research? Do you talk to Sandra Hughes, the trainer at the time, and map out a plan?
You know, I spoke to Sandra when she weighed me out, and I had looked up his form. He won a beginners with Brian O'Connell, I remember, but it took him a while to get his jumping together, and Cheltenham definitely didn't suit him. A couple of previous weeks, I think he ran the 4 mile, and Johnny King rode him, I think, and he wasn't super, to say the least. But I'd say probably fast track and a good gallop, he just struggled to get into a rhythm. And you know, sure, main aim for me was to try and get him into a rhythm as best I could. And did I think I had a chance? Sure. You know, I knew I wasn't riding the favourite, but I mean, I was down at the start with the rest of them. I had a better chance than the fella sitting in the weigh room, I suppose. So, I mean, you never really got down to the start regardless of what price you are. I think I've absolutely no chance, you know. So I was going to give him the best possible chance to finish as close as he could. And I was lucky enough that there was a bit of carnage on the inside, actually. It was a faller at the first and he brought down a couple. And I had made a decision to line up good and wide with plenty of light. And yeah, he got into a rhythm and he jumped absolutely super, actually. And he gave me a really good jump at the last. And yeah, it was a great day.
Yeah, 6 fallers at the first. Are you aware of that carnage that's going on around you in a race?
You are. Like, I mean, obviously, if you're in front of that carnage, you kind of hear it happen behind you. But it's just that there was a line of us going down to the first. And, you know, some lads make a decision when they got down, listen, I'm going to go the fastest way around and take a chance. I mean, you can't foresee these things. You know what I mean? Most of them are, fair enough, they might be novices, but they have a lot of experience and a lot of them are handicappers. So, I mean, it was just a decision that I had made that I wasn't going down there. He was a big horse. He needed light. I was happy to give him light. And, you know, it was a decision that I made. And, you know, but then there was other lads that went down and said, I'm going to go the shortest way around. And they got brought down. And that's horse racing. That can happen. We've seen it. It happens all the time. I mean, there's just nothing you can do about that. It can easily happen in the English national as well, you know, and I mean, everyone wants to get over the first. You want to get to a certain point in a race and you want to at least race. But when it happens like that at the first, you feel a bit robbed, to be honest with you. You feel like you just want to go back to the start and start all over again, you know. So I was aware of it, yeah, because it was at the first and there was no one well sorted out at that stage. And I kind of could hear the carnage more so than see it. But I knew that something was after happening.
When did you feel you had a chance to win?
I thought I was going all right jumping the back of the fort last, but at that time there was actually 3 fences up the straight, and we had gone a nice gallop every step of the way, but I had jumped well and I wanted to hang on to a bit to get me home. I was conscious of 3 fences up the straight and I wanted to leave a bit. I didn't really want to go for home just then. And actually 2 horses went away from me. Mouse's horse, actually, they went on to win the English national afterwards. He could have been second or third. And I couldn't go with them. And I was happy to I was hoping at that stage I was going to be placed. But when they went really and truly at the back of the second last and the last, they just stopped. They treaded on water and my horse just kept going. And down to the last, he winged it. I thought I'd win literally as I took off for the last. I kind of went from being 3 or 4 lengths down to them just treading on water and me landing in front and being kind of too clear. And that is really the way it happened. I mean, I never thought. There is sometimes you ride horses and you think it's only a matter of when. I have so much horse left, like it's only a matter of when I push the button. With him, it wasn't. I thought at that point it was after getting a great spin, I was going to be placed. But when I saw the 2 horses stop in front of me and I wasn't stopping, I said, geez, I have a chance here. And that's the way it happened.
What does it feel like?
Oh, unbelievable. Yeah, brilliant. Great day. I wasn't expecting it, obviously. But yeah, unbelievable. You know, to win an Irish national is savage, sure. You know, it's a race that has been good to our family over the years and it's nice to be part of it. It was brilliant. The great circumstances that surrounded it. You know, Sandra trained it obviously after her father Desi had passed away, so it was a very emotional time for all the Hughes family as well. And it was remember, it was a gorgeous sunny day and great crowds and great reception. And yeah, it's right up there with I was lucky enough, I had some lovely winners over the years, but the Irish national is right up there.
How did you celebrate?
I can't remember now, to be honest. I don't know where I probably went into Naas. I'd say I might have gathered a couple of friends around and probably went into Naas that evening, I'd say, but I can't really remember, to be honest with you. We definitely had a party. Wouldn't be like me not to have a party anyway, so there's definitely something happened. We definitely celebrated. Very
good. Does it resonate that you were a woman rider, that Anne Ferris had done it, that Nina had done it, that you'd done it? Does that resonate in the history books, or did that even cross your mind, Katie?
No, to be honest, it never crossed my mind. You know, I was just delighted to win it. For me, for Katie, for Kevin, whatever you wanted. Do you know what I mean? It didn't bother me if it was male, female. I never thought it was great now to win it, that Nina had won it, that Anne Ferris had won it, that it's going to be part of history. Never. I never even crossed my mind. I just thought it was absolutely brilliant to win an Irish national. And that's the way it was when I rode an English national and Seabass. You know, people always said the best placed, finished, whatever way they put it. But like, I never saw it like that. You know, I just thought that I finished third in the English national. But I never saw myself as being female, to be honest with you. Never.
I don't think Rachel Blackmore sees it that way either. But what she's done in the last few weeks is absolutely incredible. Like 6 winners at the Cheltenham Festival, top jockey in the champion hurdle. That's something else.
Oh, phenomenal. You know, she's a star. She really is. She's a great girl. She works very, very hard. She deserves every success she gets, and she's still improving. You know, she's so tactically aware as to what's going on around her. She rides a lovely race. She can ride a very straightforward, handy race. She can drop horses in. She knows what's going to happen before it happens, and she's getting better. You know, she doesn't look at it that way either. You know, and she shouldn't. You know, I mean, I don't look at myself as, yes, I am female. Yes, she is female, but you know, Nina's female. But like, I mean, still I'm retired. I still don't look at myself as being female, no matter what I do. You know, it's just not the way. I just don't operate that way. I don't think that way, and neither does she. And listen, she's fantastic. She's a great girl, and she deserves every success she gets.
But it will be inspiring. Like, there's very few sports where you have men and women competing in the same field, in the same sphere. Usually you have their inter brackets of their own sport. So it will be inspiring for young girls out there to think, you know what, Katie Walsh, Nina Carberry, Rachel Blackmore, I can be exactly like this.
Oh, of course. And I mean, I'm not for 1 minute. There's a great saying or slogan that came out: if you can't see it, you can't be it. And, you know, I never saw myself as that way. But yeah, you know, definitely for young girls growing up now, I even see with my 2 nieces, they're massive Rachel Blackmore fans, you know, and for that next generation of girls and going out hunting or building fences in their field and they're going to ride in the national, you know, they'll be thinking they are Rachel Blackmore. And, you know, like, yeah, like she's definitely inspired a whole, you know, that younger age coming through, that if this is what they want to do, that it is possible. You know, it's like, you know, different women in different roles. Mary Robinson being the first female president. Do you know what I mean? I'm sure she inspired other women. You know, there's people that inspire women. There's men that inspire men. There's men that inspire women. You know, yeah, she is. She's inspiring. But she's not just inspiring to females. You know, she's inspiring, full stop. Correct. Because she's so good at what she does. Like, there's not just young girls. That there's young boys out there and even younger jockeys who look at her, look at the way she rides, look at the decisions she makes. They're not looking at it because she's female. They're looking at it because they want to know if they can learn something.
Absolutely. Well said, Katie. This year's Irish Grand National, who do you think has a chance?
I like Nolan's horse, latest exhibition. I thought he was being very good behind Monkfish a couple of times, and they made a decision not to go to Cheltenham, and I would love to see them win the Irish National. He's a good jumper, he's a good stayer, and they had a great Cheltenham as well. And yeah, I'm hoping he could get the job done for them.
Any outsiders you might point us in the direction of?
Outsiders. What do you fancy? What's your outsider?
I'm a very late decider, Katie, so I'll probably decide on Monday morning. I really am such a late decider because I just see how the market moves. But probably, if I can get a Thunder and Roses 20-1 shot, I'll be happy.
Thunder and Roses 20-1.
I think Longhouse Poet is a horse that I am interested in on some of his novice form.
Martin Brazel.
Martin Brazel, yeah, he's a horse I'm interested in.
Yeah, well, I suppose it's listen, I mean, sometimes it's just one of those races that you stick the pen on the paper because it's not always the favourite that'll get the job done. But I would like to see the Nolans win and all their connections win with him.
Now, there's a small matter of the Aintree Grand National next Saturday. Any second now, your dad, Ted Walsh, trains in the colours of JP McManus, won a big staying chase at Cheltenham, the Kim Muir chase. What chance does he have? Sure,
he has as good a chance as anything. You know, he's he's in good form. He looks well. We're very happy with him, and it's a great race to be a part of, John. The plan was to go there last year, and obviously COVID has taken over the world and still has, but we're getting through it, thank God. And really looking forward to him. Sure, what will be, but it's great excitement. You know, this is a fairly small run family operation, and we have good staff out in the yard, and a lot of people work hard. So it's been great to have him here all season. So to be heading off with a realistic chance it's great for everyone involved.
21 years on since Papillon. Do you remember much of that day?
Oh, I remember like it was yesterday. 21 years. I know where I went that night. That was absolutely brilliant. I was 15 or 16 maybe, and I drove with him and looked after him, and I led him up, and it was just absolutely brilliant. Ruby riding him, Dad training him, you know, my first time in Aintree, and there was just great excitement, and to win it was absolutely super. It doesn't feel like that long ago, to be honest, but every time Aintree comes round, you know, you think of him, you think of those times, and we've had a good few runners in the national over the years as well, and it's just always a very exciting time of the year between Dad having a runner or Ruby having a ride, or I rode in a couple of times as well. So it's been a place that's been extremely lucky to all of us. So we go back there again with any second now, and sure, you know, what'll be will be. We all know what can happen. So just looking forward to it now, John, to be honest.
You're not going to worry about no crowds if he wins?
Oh God, no. We're so lucky to have racing go ahead. You know, we'd all had such great entertainment, and during Cheltenham, watching all the racing, it was absolutely fantastic. And some sport isn't that lucky, so it is great that it's happening, and the crowds will be back, not this year, but hopefully next year.
Well, Katie Walsh, thanks so much for sharing your memories of Thunder and Roses in the Irish Grand National. Enjoy the race tomorrow, and the best of luck with any second now next Saturday at Aintree.
Cheers, John. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved